Chapter 2192. Wooling Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Promise Inside the Godly Palace. Shura Jixiang was holding a long brush in his hand. He was drawing some strange symbols on the dark walls. The complicated patterns formed some mysterious patterns. Hearing the footsteps coming from outside the palace, he waved his hand gently. A light flashed and wiped away the patterns on the walls. Then, Jixiang turned around and saw Qin Hao. He showed his usual elegant smile and said, "You're awake. How is your recovery?" "My injuries are all healed. I'm in good condition. Thank you for your concern, Divine Lord," Qin Hao said respectfully. The refining pool is the essence of the slaughter world. Its magical effect is comparable to a chaotic divine artifact. However, it has a lot of limitations. It can't help you improve further. Jixiang saw Qin Hao's expression and felt that he was in good condition. However, his breath was still unstable. "Rest well for the next few days. Then, I'll take you to a place." "May I ask where the Divine Lord is taking me?" Qin Hao asked. "You'll understand when the time comes. Go and wait for the order." Shura Jixiang didn't want to tell him the truth. "I'll take my leave." Qin Hao bowed and walked out of the temple slowly. Shura seemed to have seen through his real identity, but he didn't expose him. Instead, he provided Qin Hao with many cultivation resources to help him improve his cultivation and Taoist will. It felt like he was being kept in captivity. Now, Shura said that he would take Qin Hao to a place in a few days. This made him feel that his time in the slaughter world was coming to an end. Qin Hao didn't know where Shura would take him. He didn't have the ability to resist now. He would take one step at a time. If something really happened, he would take a gamble and escape again with the help of the reincarnation mirror. After Qin Hao returned to his independent courtyard, he calmed his heart and adjusted his breathing. He tried his best to maintain his peak condition. He would only have one chance to escape alive if he faced a divine master expert with his meager power, especially a great divine master like Azura. However, after the battle in the Ghost Nest Training Hall, Qin Hao, who had been honed in the world of slaughter for a long time, discovered that the gap between him and Jun Mo had become extremely small, almost negligible. At that time, both Jun Mo and Qin Hao had not used their full strength. If they had released the full power of their divine veins, it was hard to say who would have won. In fact, the odds of victory would have been in Qin Hao's favor. His current cultivation had already surpassed that of Jun Mo. His Tianlun was about to breed the fourth holy vein. Once it was formed, Qin Hao was very confident that he could defeat Jun Mo and even kill him on the spot. The premise was that there was no interference from outsiders. Jun Mo has too many people protecting him. Fun Wei, Xin Qi, especially upper level. Qin Hao needed an external force that could restrain Shangji. Only in a completely undisturbed environment would he have a chance to get rid of Jun Mo. If Azura had kept him in captivity and provided him with the best conditions for growth, was there a hidden purpose in this that no one knew about? Did Shura need Qin Hao to achieve some kind of goal? "You guys use me. Have you ever thought that I can use you guys as well?" Qin Hao did not have a good impression of the world of slaughter. Other than Wu Shun and Old Eaglehead, no one in the entire Azura peak treated him sincerely. Since that was the case, he might as well use this opportunity to splash the muddy water between Shura deity and Jun Mo and let them tear each other apart. This would create more space and opportunities for him to counterattack. Qin Hao had a countermeasure in his heart. Shura wanted to use him to accomplish something, and he could take advantage of the situation to intensify Shura deity and Shangji. Although Shura deity had been severely injured and his strength had declined a lot, as a former prince of God, especially the son of the ancient underworld deity, his cultivation and Tianlun Dao should not be inferior to Shangji. In addition, Yellow Spring, Gui Di, and Umo were not to be trifled with. Based on their relationship with Shura, if they really fought with Jun Mo, they would not be able to stay out of it. The black godly light lingered around Qin Hao's body, taking advantage of the situation to open up a way for him to protect himself. This was a competition between the hunter and the prey. Shura deity and Jun Mo both saw him as the prey, but they did not know that sometimes the hunter was also the prey in the eyes of the prey. A few days later, Qin Hao was summoned back to the Azura Palace. When he arrived, he was shocked by the lineup in front of him. Ji Xiang Azura, Slayer, Mo, 2, 17 godly generals of Azura Peak, more than 20 red-clothed commanders, and all the red-clothed elites were all here. The scale was not large. Altogether, there were only about 400 of them. However, among these beings, the lowest Tianlun was of the immortal grade. The least had godly veins of 2 or more lines, and the red-clothed commanders had 4 or even 5 lines. They were the essence of the entire world of slaughter. "What are you going to do, godly master?" Qin Hao asked in a shocked tone. "Join the team. It's a long journey, and there are others waiting for us." "I'll tell you everything on the way," Ji Xiang said. Qin Hao nodded and moved to the side of the Slayer. His position was close to Mo Tuesday. With his status, he could not be compared to a godly general, but after Qin Hao came to Azura Peak, everyone could see that he was highly valued by the godly master and was treated as the successor of Azura Palace. After all, other than the godly master and slayer, he was the only one in the world of slaughter who had cast a perfect Tianlun. Not long ago, he had defeated a top talent from the Archean world's Tianzhao godly domain. The godly lights swept up, and the team flew up, forming a black torrent and flying out of the heavenly path. "You must be very curious. There are some things in front of you, but I see through them but do not expose them." Ji Xiang turned his face slightly and said to Qin Hao, "Godly master." Qin Hao's heartstrings suddenly tightened. "Don't be nervous." Azura Ji Xiang waved his hand and interrupted Qin Hao. He looked forward and said with his hands behind his back, "Ruo Chu, I don't care where you come from or what you've done. Now, I need you to do something. As long as you help me, you can do whatever you want. I won't stop you. Of course, if you still have a trace of nostalgia for the world of slaughter, I'll welcome you to stay." When Azura said these words, all the godly generals stared at Qin Hao eerily. It was as if he was an alien race that did not belong to Azura Peak. Qin Hao felt uncomfortable being stared at by so many godly generals. However, since Azura had said so, he did not have to continue hiding. He asked frankly, "What does the godly master need me to do?" "There's a door to the void in this wilderness. It was formed by the will of Pluto after he fell in the battle between the underworld and the light domain in ancient times. I don't know what's behind the door, and I can't open it. As a former godly prince, even if you have the bloodline of Pluto, you didn't inherit all of his godly power. Isn't it ridiculous?" Ji Xiang looked at Qin Hao again and laughed sadly. Although Huang Quan, Mo, Guadi, and Azura himself had perfect heavenly wheels, they only inherited a part of Pluto's godly power. This was normal. It was not surprising for the godly princes of other godly domains. Some godly princes even had their heavenly wheels lowered. For example, Long Ao, the son of the dragon god, betrayed the 10,000 Saints Dragon Palace and built a family business in the sword world. Could it be that I can open it? Qin Hao had already guessed, based on Azura's words. The earth godly power can reverse the attributes of the heavenly wheels. It's the strongest godly power of Pluto, and it's also the foundation of the underworld. Huang Quan, Mo, Guadi, and I didn't inherit it. The Pluto's door can only be seen through the perception of the earth godly power, Ji Xiang said seriously. How can I have the earth godly power? Qin Hao was shocked. The strongest godly power of the ancient underworld king was in him. Even Qin Hao did not know that he had nothing to do with Pluto. He was not an illegitimate child. What was this? That's right. Within your evil power, there is indeed the power of filth earth. Although it is still very weak and can't be used without you knowing, but think about the battle with the path of ghost, path of bone, and path of soul. At that time, you reversed the divine power of the evil ghost, skeleton, and specter, causing their cultivation to be unbalanced, and the root of Tianlun was cruelly destroyed. And the power that reversed the divine power was the Nether King's filth earth divine power. Ji Xiang stretched out his hand and pointed at Qin Hao. You're not someone from the slaughter world. The appearance of the earth god's power might have something to do with the heavenly Tao you were born in. The heavenly Tao contains this power. It's just that it hasn't been used yet. It has always been hidden in your evil energy. Now, I need you to find the feeling you had when you fought the evil ghosts. Release the earth god's power and help me open the gates of hell. Be it sword cultivators or other cultivators from the god realm, Azura didn't care about the hatred between Qin Hao and Junimo. He only wanted to open the door formed by the Netherworld King's Tao will and obtain the key item inside. If Qin Hao really did open it for Azura, then it was not a bad idea to let him go out of consideration for this contribution. With the power of the ancient Underworld King, Azura's ascension to the Divine King realm would not be affected by Qin Hao's departure. Okay, Qin Hao thought for a while and nodded. I can help you open the Pluto's door. If I want to leave, I hope you won't stop me. It would be better if there was no conflict with Shura. As for the item inside the door, it wasn't something Qin Hao could covet. He knew the consequences when he thought about the reincarnation mirror. Junimo didn't hesitate to start a world-ending war for the reincarnation mirror. If he took the item inside the Pluto's door, Shura would tear him to pieces. Don't worry, my Tao the Massacre World is very trustworthy. If you help me, I'll make things convenient for you, Ji Xiang said seriously. In order to acquire the items from the sect, he could even use Qin Hao's name to prevent the matter with Lord Mo from happening. Thank you, Senior Shura. Qin Hao cupped his hands in respect. At this moment, his body and mind couldn't help but relax. The crisis and shackles that had been weighing on him for a long time seemed to have disappeared in an instant. If Shura really kept his word, he would undoubtedly form a good relationship with the Massacre World. If it really didn't work, Qin Hao still had the reincarnation mirror as his last trump card. He could barely escape. The group continued forward in silence. Just as Shura said before they set off, there were indeed people waiting for them in front of the wilderness. Qin Hao looked over and saw 3 tall figures standing side by side. They were the Netherworld Divine Lord, the Yumo Divine Lord, and Guadi. Behind the 3 Divine Lords, like Shura's red-clothed elites, there were also many direct descendants of the world behind them. Even from far away, they could feel an extremely heavy pressure. Chapter 2193. The 3 Divine Lords of the Netherworld had arrived as if they had agreed to wait here. Their lineup was not large, but all of them were elites. Fourth brother, you're here, said the Divine Lord of the Netherworld. Ji Xiang nodded slightly. Let's continue forward. We haven't returned to that place for many years. Now, the 4 of us can be considered to be paying our respects to our ancestral land. Guadi turned and walked forward. The 3 Divine Lords followed, and the elites of the 4 realms gathered together, forming a mighty lineup that kept advancing into the depths of the ancient underworld. Qin Hao followed between Slayer and Mo Tuesday. As he met up with the Netherworld, he found that the experts of the other 3 realms had faintly formed an encirclement, surrounding him in layers, as if they were escorting an important treasure. This trip was of great significance to the 4 Divine Lords. After the Battle of the Underworld, the heavenly way of the Underworld had been shattered, and the wilderness had been divided into 4, forming the 4 Divine Realms. Now, Qin Hao's arrival would open the Nether Coffin door for them. If they really obtained the power of the ancient Underworld King from behind the door, the 4 Divine Realms would show signs of recovery and return to the peak of the Underworld. Therefore, Qin Hao's existence was naturally important, and they could not afford to lose him. It seems that I was still too naive. He laughed bitterly in his heart. Surrounded by so many great gods, Qin Hao's success rate of using the reincarnation mirror to escape was next to nothing. He felt that even the wills of the Netherworld people were enveloping him. He had become the absolute core of the 4 Divine Realms. But since he had come this far, there was no turning back. In fact, Qin Hao also wanted to see what was behind the Nether Coffin door. According to the reincarnation old man, it was the unknown land of the Divine Kings. Continuing forward, The powerful team led by the four divine lords exuded an extremely heavy atmosphere. As they went deeper, the remnants of the battle of the underworld gradually appeared in their eyes. Qin Hao saw countless huge meteorites wandering in this wilderness. They were broken, weathered, and filled with an ancient and mysterious aura. Upon closer inspection, these meteorites were actually formed by the destruction of towering statues. Qin Hao could still imagine the grandeur and solemnity of the nether realm from the broken faces carved on the meteorites. This was the core of the ancient nether region, where the Nether King Palace was located. It was also the ancient battlefield where the Nether War had taken place. As Qin Hao continued to move forward, moving between the broken boulders, a strong aura of death began to linger in the space. Some strange sounds faintly rang in his ears, like roaring and fighting. The tragic and stirring feeling transmitted through the sounds to his divine soul, and a magnificent epic battle scene seemed to appear in his mind. Qin Hao wasn't the only one who was affected. Zhixiang Azura and the Netherworld Divine Lord were also frowning. Even the veteran Slayer was frowning. Their expressions were distorted, as if they were resisting something. Revisiting this place brought back memories of that battle that had been engraved in their hearts. Countless ancient, god-level powerhouses have fallen here. Qin Hao's perfect Tianluan revolved silently. His body was enveloped in a faint brilliance, and his divine will merged with the remnant aura of the heavenly path. He could feel the level of those powerhouses. There were ferocious, murderous gods, vengeful ghost gods, and naturally, there were also opponents of the nether realm, the remnant power of light from the realm of light. These Dao wills seemed to still be fighting even after their deaths. They were attached to the broken continents and ancient buildings, turning into strange sounds that intertwined for eternity. "We're here." Zhixiang Azura led the group to a stop. The Netherworld Divine Lord and the other two also stopped moving forward. Their bodies were suffused with divine light as they floated in the depths of the chaos. This was the location of this trip. Because of the outbreak of the Divine War, the Nether Realm was broken through. Only huge fragments of broken buildings could be seen floating here, and there was no continent to land on. However, in the memories of Azura and the Netherworld Divine Lord, this was the location of the Nether King Palace. At this moment, Zhixiang looked at Qin Hao and pointed at the pitch-black space in front of them. He said, "Release your Tianluan divine power and use the aura of the filthy earth to sense it. Find that door from the void." Qin Hao's Dao wills were the closest to the Nether King's. Only he could sense the existence of the door. Azura and the Netherworld Divine Lord couldn't do it. "Okay, I'll try." Qin Hao nodded. Then, he slowly walked forward, accompanied by the blooming of a ring of evil light. The perfect aura of the great Dao descended. Countless evil spirits swayed behind him, and traces of evil aura swept forward, floating in the void, trying to communicate with the Nether Gate. Soon, under Qin Hao's perception, the drifting evil aura seemed to be given life and began to intertwine, forming a pattern. It emitted a gray divine light, and two incomparably huge, ancient doors slowly appeared from the intertwining light. Qin Hao looked up. The two Nether King's doors were majestic and boundless, towering tens of thousands of feet high, like a mountain standing horizontally in front of him. They were born out of the void. Suddenly, an incomparably ancient aura was transmitted, revealing supreme majesty. It was as if these weren't two doors, but a figure, the body of the ancient Nether King. "Father God." Azura's eyes flashed as he looked at the doors of the Nether Coffin in shock. Hot tears flowed from his eyes. Huang Quan, Gue Di, and Umo all choked as they faced the ancient giant doors. It was as if they were once again seeing the Nether King who gave birth to them. "Open it." Gue Di gritted his teeth, and his expression became more and more ferocious as he commanded Qin Hao in a commanding tone. Qin Hao took a deep breath and steadied his mind. As the demonic emblem under his clothes continued to release evil power, the ancient giant doors in front of everyone shone brighter and brighter. The accompanying pressure also became stronger and stronger. giving the illusion that the nether gate had been resurrected. However, no matter how Qin Hao tried, the two tightly shut stone doors couldn't open a gap. What's going on? Ji Xiang frowned and asked. I'm not sure. Maybe the power is too weak. Qin Hao still hadn't figured out the true essence of the power of the earth. Moreover, he hadn't condensed it and integrated it into the Tianlin. This kid still can't freely control the power of the earth. Huang Quan saw the problem. Think about the battle at Motu Palace. Carefully savor your feelings at that time. Ji Xiang guided Qin Hao. Qin Hao closed his eyes and replayed the scene in his mind. Then, he shook his head and opened his eyes, replying to Ji Xiang. It's difficult to rely on feelings alone. I need to do it again. Again? Huang Quan's heart trembled. Does he mean to find a few people to practice with? Does this kid think that the lives of the people in Huang Quan realm are worthless? Divine lords, I need your power, Qin Hao said to Huang Quan. Hearing this, Huang Quan's heart suddenly went cold. What's going on? Does he want to use the reverse divine power of the earth on him and Azura? This kid has guts. Divine lords, I need to use your Tao of slaughter, Tao of ghost, Tao of bone, and Tao of soul to guide the earth. Only the Nether King's bloodline can resonate with the earth. Qin Hao didn't want to reverse the divine power of the four divine lords. Instead, he wanted to use their Tao intent to increase the intensity of the earth. Qin Hao wasn't the Nether King's child. He didn't have the Nether King's bloodline. He needed the help of Azura and the others. Listen to him, Ji Xiang said. With Qin Hao's current cultivation, it was impossible for him to reverse the power of the four divine lords. They could rest assured and let him do as he wished. Huang Quan and the others silently took in a deep breath. As Nether Princes, they never thought that they would one day have to bear the Nether King's earth divine power. Although they were unwilling, in order to open the Nether King's gate, they could only do as Qin Hao said. Just like what Azura said, this kid's cultivation was low and he couldn't hurt them. Then, rings of divine light bloomed. Huang Quan, Umo, Guadi, and Ji Xiang all released their heavenly wheels. They all had the Nether King's bloodline, so their heavenly wheels were perfect. However, the aura of their Tao intent was different. Ji Xiang's heavenly wheel was black, and the murderous aura inside was very strong. Divine Lord Huang Quan's heavenly wheel was a huge skeleton that seemed to be made of purple gold. It looked indestructible. Divine Lord Umo's heavenly wheel was ethereal, like a gas that surrounded his body. Guadi's heavenly wheel was more frightening. It was formed by a sea of blood. Countless skulls and broken limbs floated in the sea of blood. It was extremely uncomfortable to look at. Qin Hao didn't have the mood to admire the heavenly wheels of the four divine lords. His evil energy slowly flowed out and separated into four lines, connecting to the heavenly wheels of the four divine lords. During this process, Huang Quan and the others didn't resist. They knew that if they released a little bit of their divine energy, Qin Hao could instantly evaporate. At this moment, the four Nether King's descendants were like willing vessels, allowing Qin Hao to spy on them and extract their Tao intent. Qin Hao closed his eyes again. When the evil energy pierced into the heavenly wheels of the four divine lords, he felt four majestic divine auras sweep over. They were so strong that they could easily tear him apart. Fortunately, they didn't want to kill me. Qin Hao sighed. Although he still couldn't control the power of the filthy earth, it wasn't as bad as everyone thought. Through continuous training in private, he could already separate the filthy earth from the evil energy and guide it. Now, in order to open the Hell King's gate, Qin Hao naturally couldn't risk it all and exhaust all of his divine energy. After all, once the gate was opened, no one knew what would happen next. He had to conserve his strength. No matter how weak he was, he still needed to have a precaution. Therefore, guiding the divine energy of Shura and the others to open the Hell King's gate was better than exhausting himself. At this moment, streams of divine light of different colors were continuously gathering towards Qin Hao's heavenly wheels along with the evil energy. He was like a tentacle monster, connecting the four divine lords and gathering their divine energy. Then, through the filthy earth, he transferred it to the towering Hell Gate. Gradually, the ancient Nether Gate that towered over the universe changed. An extremely ancient face appeared on the gate. When this face appeared, Huang Quan and the others almost shouted out because this face belonged to the Nether King. However, when they noticed that it was merely an illusion and didn't contain any signs of Tao insight, the hearts of Huang Quan and the others that were in their throats relaxed. If the Hell King's Tao was left on the gate, then if they accidentally caused an abnormality, they might not die, but it was impossible for Huang Quan and the others to escape safely. They probably wouldn't be able to recover without hundreds of thousands of years. However, other than the 4 divine princes, the others weren't so lucky. Including the Slayers, they would evaporate in an instant. The teams they brought with them this time were the elites of the 4 divine realms. Once they were gone, the 4 divine realms would become an empty nest. Just thinking about it made their hearts ache. Rumble. With an incomparably heavy sound, the towering stone gate slowly opened with the activation of the Hell King's bloodline. An ancient aura with an old moldy smell swept over everyone's face. Qin Hao looked at the crack that was getting bigger and bigger. At this moment, he felt like he had opened up another universe. Chapter 2194. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The divine light slowly disappeared into the stone door. The face of the Nether King twisted into a whirlpool, like a deep and endless passage. At this moment, Azura, Huang Quan, and the others were trembling with excitement. They had waited for a long time, and today, the Nether Gate had finally opened. The 4 figures flew forward at almost the same time and disappeared into the whirlpool. Qin Hao didn't move. He dispersed the evil power of the heavenly wheel and waited quietly in front of the whirlpool. He knew that even if he went in, he wouldn't be able to get anything inside. He might as well stay outside to show his sincerity. I hope Azura can fulfill his promise. Ever since he came to the massacre world, he had never been as calm as he was now. It was as if he had let down his guard. Qin Hao had fulfilled his promise and helped Azura open the Nether Gate. The massacre world had come to an end, and he had to think about where to go next. At this moment, inside the Nether Gate, Ji Xiang, Huang Quan, Gue Di, and Umo had entered with high expectations. After the Netherworld War broke out and the ancient Nether King died, he left them a sentence: although the Nether King is dead, the Nether Tao will not disappear. When you have truly touched the true essence of the Divine King, you can open this gate. At that time, the Nether Realm will return to its peak, and new Nether King will be born from the 4 of you. This sentence was like a prophecy that constantly encouraged the 4 Nether Princes. They set up their world as their master and continued to cultivate. They comprehended the primordial great Tao and stimulated the power of the world so that one day they could inherit the mantle of the Nether King and become the new Nether King. However, when the day came, everything was wrong. They had been pursuing it tirelessly, but the Nether King had played a huge joke on them. There's nothing here. Huang Quan was in the whirlpool, looking at the boundless Milky Way world. The so-called Nether Gate was just a corner of the elemental wilderness. Behind the gate was the same as outside. Ha ha! Umo let out a bitter and hoarse laugh. He tried his best to sense everything, hoping to see even a trace of the Nether King's Tao while in the whirlpool. However, as Huang Quan had said, everything was empty. The Divine King's treasure, Tao will, and there wasn't even a hint. Translation Gue Di was silent. His facial features gradually became ferocious, and his expression became more and more frightening. It was as if he was being played, and the one who was playing him was his own father. Ji Xiang's elegant demeanor was gone, and his eyes were bloodshot. How high his expectations were before he came was how disappointed he was now. That kind of excessive expectations led to a kind of despair of having his hopes dashed. In the battle between Ming Dao and Guang Ming, his spirit was scattered, and his twin sister died in front of him. All these years, in order to restrain his uncontrollable murderous nature and prevent himself from going berserk, he personally tied himself to an iron chair and let the Hell King's iron press down on his body. 500 years of war, countless reincarnations that never stopped. He found his lost soul bodies one by one, catalyzing the path of Azura in the world of slaughter to the extreme. What was his purpose? For revenge, in order to become the king of hell, to break through the radiant domain, for the regret of his sister's death, to lead the Nether King's region to a new peak. However, all of this turned into bubbles as they entered the Netherworld Gate. When you truly touch the true essence of the Divine King, you can open this gate. At that time, the Nether Domain will return to its peak, and a new Nether King will be born from the four of you. Shura finally understood this sentence. It meant that only one of them, who cultivated to the Divine King, could open the Netherworld Gate. At that time, no matter what was behind the gate, it was no longer important because one of them had become a Divine King. Only by becoming a Divine King could one open the Netherworld Gate. They had always misinterpreted the meaning of Nether King. The reason why they were so disappointed now was that they had borrowed the power of Qin how to open the Netherworld Gate. In the end, they found that their dreams were empty. Or perhaps, the original intention of Nether King's words was to encourage them to grow stronger. In fact, the people of Yellow Spring had always been working hard to open the Netherworld Gate. However, no one could accept the price of taking a shortcut. Terrifying sound waves erupted from Ji Xiang's mouth. The anger and resentment that had been suppressed for countless years completely went out of control at this moment. Even if he understood Nether King's original intention, he still couldn't bear the consequences of his wish not being fulfilled. Boundless, pitch-black divine light of slaughter swept across his body like a blade. The raging divine power of slaughter tore apart the underworld gate formed by the whirlpool. With a loud explosion, the only remaining item of the underworld king exploded. Qin Hao waited quietly outside, waiting for the result inside. In his opinion, he had already opened the Netherworld Gate. No matter if it was Shura or Yellow Spring, the four Netherworld princes who obtained the item behind the gate, they should fulfill their promise. However, what Qin Hao waited for was the sudden collapse of the whirlpool. A figure covered in pitch-black divine light shot out. Shura's eyes were bleeding, and his pale white fingers went straight for Qin Hao's throat. There was nothing behind the Netherworld Gate. His wish to become a Divine King was just empty talk. Shura couldn't change reality, but he had the chance to change his fate. There was more than one way to become a Divine King. It didn't matter if there was no treasure behind the gate. There was a treasure in front of him. As long as he seized Qin Hao's power and extracted the power of Earth from the evil power, Shura might be able to become a Divine King. The bloodline of Nether King flowed in his body. He only lacked the other party's strongest power. Since Qin Hao had it, why didn't he take it? His hope turned into disappointment. Shura set his sights on Qin Hao. This was normal. At this moment, Qin Hao saw the Azura flying over and attacking him without any explanation. He didn't even have the time to ask what was behind the door. Not only did the Divine Master of a realm not fulfill his promise, he even tore it to shreds. Qin Hao's heavenly wheel immediately exploded. The aura of a perfect great path surged out. As the evil spirit swayed, he used the Fleetfoot step. His body passed between the Slayers and MO2 at an unbelievable speed. Before the Shura Divine Generals could react, he had already left the group and widened the distance between them. Since the Divine King had attacked, Qin Hao naturally wouldn't hold back. Even if Jun Mo was beside him at this moment, how could Qin Hao hide his life-saving technique in a life-and-death situation? The speed of the Fleetfoot step had also exceeded MO2 and the others' evaluation of Qin Hao. In their impression, according to Qin Hao's strength, it was impossible for him to explode with such speed. They were surprised for a moment, causing them to escape directly from his side. However, it was impossible for Qin Hao to completely escape. The surrounding area was filled with the elite forces of the four divine realms. He was still in the eye of the storm. The Fleetfoot step could only allow him to escape MO2 and the others and avoid Shura's killing move. Divine King, why are you doing this? Qin Hao asked in an extremely uneasy manner. On the heavenly wheel, 3 divine veins flickered faintly. One could even vaguely see the shadow of a 4th divine vein at the edge of the outermost divine vein. In the eyes of the Azura divine generals, this lowly little divine guard was about to grow to the same level as them. This scene shocked many people. However, Shura Jixiang's expression didn't change. After his attack failed, he only paused and stared at his opponent with his scarlet eyes. His black hair fluttered in the wind. Since he knew that Qin Hao wasn't a creature of the slaughter world, he also knew that Qin Hao had held back his strength. When the sword world was destroyed, the entire world's forces had helped Qin Hao escape at all costs. There was no doubt about his talent and ability. The refining pool was the most precious place of the ancient Netherrealm. Qin Hao definitely wouldn't be able to produce just one divine vein. Moreover, Shura also knew that Qin Hao had a chaotic divine weapon that could increase one's cultivation. Chapter 2195. Things have changed from what I imagined. Therefore, I need to borrow something from you. Don't worry, it won't be painful. I will give you the most direct death, Jixiang said coldly. Senior, we have an agreement. Isn't the massacre world the most trustworthy? Qin Hao's heart turned cold. What Azura borrowed, naturally, could not be returned. Agreements are made by people, and people can change them, right? Jixiang approached Qin Hao step by step. The massacre world had always been trustworthy, and Azura had always been very principled. But the situation forced him to be an unprincipled god. If he did not extract Qin Hao's earth divine power, how could he talk about reviving the underworld and taking revenge on the Radiant region when he was missing a soul? Something had to be sacrificed in order to achieve hegemony. It was a mere principle. 4th brother, this is not good. Yellow Spring and the others flew out from the exploding vortex. Their movements were already one step slower than Azura. That's right, 4th brother. We are all underworld princes. It doesn't matter who gets the earth divine power, Gui Di said. His heavenly chakram revolved, and a sea of floating skeletons surrounded his body. Yumo Master let out a hoarse sneer, but the expression on his face was no different from Yellow Spring's. Obviously, he was also greedy for Qin Hao's earth divine power. If Azura wanted to take it all for himself, they would not allow it. This brat's heavenly chakram is perfect. The earth divine power does not only exist in his divine power. His bones, blood, and even his soul are filled with traces of earth. Azura glanced at the 3. Okay, I want his bones, Yellow Spring said. I want his blood. Gui Di followed closely. Then 4th brother, please be careful. Don't completely destroy his soul. Just leave a wisp of it for me, Yumo Master said with a smile. They naturally did not have any objections to such an arrangement. Qin Hao's heart was beating violently. Through the eyes of the 4 netherworld princes, he felt as if he was a lump of meat on the dining table, about to be eaten by these divine masters. Silently looking at a blind spot, Qin Hao suddenly used the Fleetfoot stride. That blind spot was the weakest spot of the 4 divine generals. At the same time, a mysterious divine light was quietly released from the celestial source in his heart. The ancient aura of reincarnation began to fill Qin Hao's body. At this moment, the scene seemed to have suddenly become very slow. However, in everyone's eyes, Qin Hao, who was moving extremely slowly, passed through the powerful immortal generals and escaped towards the outside of chaos. During this process, all the powerful immortal generals in the 4 immortal realms were affected by the transmigration ground. As a result, their movements became extremely slow. They could only turn their stiff necks bit by bit and watch Qin Hao gradually disappear into the distance. Wong, an enormous palm that could hold up the sky, smashed down, and it carried extremely strong divine radiance of slaughter as it enveloped the entire wasteland. Qin Hao escaped to the edge of the giant palm. Just as he was about to brush past it, he suddenly felt that the space was bound by a mighty and supreme force. Then the giant palm hit his body. Blood spurted out from his throat. Qin Hao was like a falling leaf, slapped back from the direction he was escaping. "I'm sorry, kid. It's not that I'm not loyal. If I stay, I'll die with you. Goodbye." An ancient mirror flew out from his chest under his clothes. It tried very hard to penetrate the wind created by the palm. Just as Qin Hao was about to fly back, the mirror refracted in the opposite direction. However, how could the giant palm that covered chaos allow it to escape? With a clench of the void, the giant palm shrank and grabbed the position where the mirror had escaped. As the pitch-black divine power of slaughter turned into a gale, the old man of Samsara screamed hoarsely and fell into Ji Xiang's hands. "You could escape from Shang-Ji's hands because he was stupid. Do you really think you can escape from me a second time?" Ji Xiang held the reincarnation mirror and tossed it in his hand. During the Battle of the Sword World, Shang-Ji's divine will was completely focused on Qin Hao, so he neglected the reincarnation mirror. That was why he was lucky enough to escape with Qin Hao. Who was Ji Xiang? He was the Shura god's most meticulous soul. From the moment Qin Hao stepped into the slaughter world, he had every step under his control. Blood spurted from his mouth uncontrollably. Qin Hao knelt on one leg in the air, one hand below. He had never seen Ji Xiang fight before. He heard from the Wu god that Shura was injured, so he thought that Ji Xiang's strength was not that great. Otherwise, he would not have let the Slayer do everything for him. However, this palm made him understand that Shura's strength was much stronger than the Slayer's. They were not on the same level. Even if he was facing Shang-Ji, the first divine lord of the primeval world, he would not be much weaker. "I sympathize with you and want to give you a way out. However, my father is too disappointing, so I have no choice but to treat you like this." Shura's figure flashed and floated in front of Qin Hao. He bent down and squatted in front of Qin Hao. He raised his chin with one hand, his scarlet eyes admiring the other's expression. Shura knew that Qin Hao was seriously injured by that palm. Without the reincarnation mirror, it was impossible for him to escape. Transferring your misfortune to others, is this the style of a divine lord? Qin Hao's voice was weak. Whether it was the finger on his chin or Ji Xiang's scarlet eyes, he felt an indescribable coldness. "We are both divine lords, but Senior Avicii's breadth of mind is something you will never be able to compare to. If fate opened its eyes, the one who has the chance to become a divine king should be Sword God Avici, not a narrow-minded and despicable Shura god. The state of mind determines the situation, and the Tao comes from the heart." This was Qin Hao's heartfelt words. Bang! Ji Xiang threw out a palm, sending Qin Hao tumbling away. Along the way, his black hair turned silver, and his facial features, which were distorted by divine power, returned to their original appearance. At this moment, Ruo Chu, who had cultivated the Tao of slaughter, returned to the Seamless Academy's disciple, Li Chuji. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound of swords rang out, and all kinds of swords slowly condensed together with Qin Hao's sword will. Finally, they turned into 81 divine swords. At this moment, there seemed to be a righteous figure in each of these divine swords. When the 81 swords surrounded him, it was as if 81 gods of the sword world were protecting him. Their sharpness was directed at the Shura god. Kill. He pinched his fingers together, and the 81 swords formed a river of swords. It was like a waterfall of swords from the 9 heavens that went against the flow of the river. Countless sword sounds intertwined in the air, as if different sword cultivators were roaring, and fell on the Shura god's head. "Is this the Tao of sword that the sword world taught you?" Ji Xiang raised his head, and his scarlet eyes flashed. The corner of his mouth curled up in a mocking smile. He immediately waved his sleeve, and an endless stream of black, killing aura swept out, annihilating the 81 swords that were falling down. Qin Hao spat out another mouthful of blood. It wasn't that he was weak, but that his opponent was too strong. In the past, he always felt that as long as he was willing, there was nothing in the world that he couldn't do. But now, he realized that there would come a time when a person's strength would be exhausted. He didn't believe in fate. He tried and tried, but he couldn't change this fate. Perhaps, on the day that the Seamless Realm was destroyed, he should have died in battle with the other sword cultivators. But that was good. At least he wasn't in Junmo's hands now. The palm that contained the light of slaughter slowly pressed down from above. Jixiang's face was expressionless. He was the Shura god, and had killed too many gods. He could send down the flames of war to cleanse the world. Why would he care about the life of a sword cultivator? On the contrary, Qin Hao's death could help the Shura god. It was a great honor. No, from the wounded body, a soul that was nearly destroyed in both body and soul flew out. Miaoli spread her arms and stood in front of Qin Hao, facing the descending palm of the Azure deity. Why? He's already lost too much. He's already worked so hard. Why is fate so unfair? People who work so hard to survive can't see any hope at all. Yet, those murderers and scoundrels who only know how to take from others can still be so righteous. Miori had witnessed Qin Hao's growth. She had seen all the hardships he had gone through. In the past, the Divine Palace's wish was to create a god. Generations of Divine Palace sovereigns worked hard to achieve this goal. When Qin Hao became a god, Miori was so moved that she covered her tears and cried. Only now did she see clearly that gods were just fish on the chopping block. They couldn't help themselves, and there were many things they couldn't do. They weren't omnipotent. Boom! The cold palm pressed down slowly, pressing against Miori's head. It suddenly stopped. The red in the Shura god's eyes faded. For some reason, Qin Hao felt that the Shura god's incomparably cold aura actually had a trace of warmth. Ingsha. Jixiang looked at Miori with a dazed expression. Was he dreaming? Chapter 2196. At the beginning of the Hongmeng, the ancient god era, one after another, powerful innate deity kings awakened from the chaos. Their innate powers contained the most complete primitive Daos. However, the great Dao abilities that each god king was proficient in were different. The underworld deity kings specialized in the Dao of death and reincarnation. He used the will of the underworld to create spirits, giving birth to Huang Quan, Gui Di, and Umo. Each of them inherited a part of his godly power. When the underworld deity king gave birth to his fourth son with the Tao of slaughter, an abnormality occurred. A baby girl was born with the fourth son. Like Shura, she had the purest killing godly power and was named Ingsha. The baby girl's appearance was not part of the underworld deity king's plan. It was an accident. However, her birth had brought the only warmth to the cold Nether God realm. The Nether God king doted on his little princess very much. Yellow Spring, Gui Di, and Umo, these three seniors who were born and had incomparably ugly appearances, all viewed Ingsha as the treasure in their palms, the jade in their hearts. From the majestic underworld deity king to every deity king and deity general, the entire underworld deity king treated the only princess Ingsha as if she was in their mouths. Huang Quan, Gui Di, and Umo's conflicted feelings of wanting to get close to her, but being afraid of hurting her were the most obvious. Huang Quan and the others actually liked this younger sister very much in their hearts, and also hoped to be able to play with Ingsha like Azura. However, due to her appearance and the Dao intent she possessed being extremely ugly, they wanted to approach her, but were afraid of scaring her. Every time they faced their adorable younger sister, they would feel an endless sense of inferiority in their hearts, unable to show their faces. Gradually, their love for her was buried deep in their hearts. They looked at her coldly and silently. Their love for Ingsha turned into jealousy for Shura. Shura had normal facial features, but why were they so deformed? Even their Dao was so ugly. The more they thought about it, the stronger their jealousy for Shura. Slowly, it turned into hatred. They wanted Shura to die and disappear from the underworld deity king. Perhaps only then would Ingsha's respect for her three brothers. However, the winds and clouds changed. The underworld realm and the light realm, the two most extreme forces of the great desolate era, finally erupted into a battle between god kings. In this battle, not only did the two ancient god kings die, Ingsha also died. She was born at the same time as Shura and possessed the same Dao, divine power. Shura's feelings for Ing Sha far surpassed his three elder brothers. In Azura's eyes, he and Ing Sha were real siblings. Huang Quan was covered in skeletons, Gue Di was covered in blood and flesh, and Umo was like a shadow, dispensable. They were not his ideal brothers. Only Ing Sha fit the Shura's heart the most. Unfortunately, Ing Sha had died. He had died in front of Azura, just inches away from him. The pain of being so close yet unable to do anything about it had become a regret that he would never be able to erase. At that moment, Shura completely erupted as he comprehended the ultimate divine meaning of the Tao of slaughter, the Tao of mutual slaughter. However, he was still unable to bring his sister back. He couldn't even avenge Ing Sha. In the end, his soul was separated from his body by the son of God of Light, who killed Ing Sha. That feeling of helplessness was similar to the situation of Qin, Hao, and Miori. Perhaps Miori didn't know that she looked exactly the same as Shura's twin sister. When her soul suddenly appeared, Shura even thought that Ing Sha was in front of him. At that moment, Shura's mind was blank. Not only him, Huang Quan, Gue Di, and Umo's hearts were also thumping wildly. When they looked over, their expressions were filled with extreme shock and surprise. The three powerful divine masters lost their composure. I beg you, let him go. My junior brother has never done anything to let you down. He has a clear conscience towards everyone. If you really want to kill him, then kill me. Miori's tears flowed down her weak and illusory soul. She knew that Qin Hao didn't have it easy. As his elder sister, she couldn't provide even the slightest bit of help. She was even a burden to him. She needed to borrow his heavenly wheel to nourish her soul. She had always been consuming his energy after they parted. Since that was the case, what was the point of her living? She was willing to use this remnant soul to exchange for Qin Hao's chance to be reborn. As long as Shura was willing to give her this chance, she wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice her life. She only hoped that the great god in front of her wouldn't completely destroy Qin Hao. Senior sister. Qin Hao pursed his lips. His 10 fingers sunk deeply into the flesh of his fists. Miao Li still wanted to protect him. How could he not hate his own incompetence? Until now, he still hadn't found a suitable body for his senior martial sister to resurrect. The space suddenly became quiet. It was extremely quiet. Immediately after, the 4 great divine generals of the divine world that filled the space turbulence all witnessed the Azura god's palm slowly moving away from the top of Miao Li's head. Every single divine general's gaze was filled with astonishment. Shura god, the synonym of death. Shura's appearance was to bring death to the world. His entire body, his blood, his will, and even his Tao intent were all ice cold. However, this was the first time he had moved his hand away from someone else's body. Under the overwhelming power, his body slowly retreated. He was so careful that it was as if he was afraid that he would hurt the woman's remnant soul if he used even the slightest bit of force. "My king, that's not Princess Ing Sha." A hoarse shout came from afar. The Slayer was a creature that was born before the destruction of the underworld. He had extremely ancient memories and naturally recognized Princess Ing Sha of the underworld. Although they looked very similar, the Slayer was well aware that she wasn't Shura's biological sister. He stopped. His king actually stopped. How could he stop? The Earth Divine power was right in front of him. The opportunity to achieve hegemony was right in front of Shura's eyes. He actually gave it up for an unrelated woman. At this moment, the Slayer's emotions were extremely chaotic. Just like Shura's emotions after entering the underworld gate, he was filled with hysteria. He didn't dare to believe it, nor was he willing to accept the truth. I know. The Shura god's fluttering black hair gradually calmed down. Strands of hair gently fell on his shoulders. He looked at Miori with a complicated expression. At this moment, Qin Hao, who was behind Miori, was like an unrelated person. All of his attention was focused on Miori when she appeared, just like how he used to look at Ing Sha's laughter. Although they were unrelated, he really couldn't bear to kill someone who looked so much like his biological sister. Chapter 2197. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, June Mo, fourth brother, do it. Yellow Spring clenched his fists and roared. Hearing this, Qin Hao immediately stepped out from his half-kneeling position, grabbed Miori's hand, and flew back, distancing himself from Shura God. Big brother, Father Gods will warned us to use our own strength to cultivate the way of the God King. I think I was wrong. If I kill this kid, even if I can use the power of the Earth God, I won't be able to cultivate to the God King realm. Ji Xiang silently turned his head, and the unwavering killing intent in his eyes turned into confusion. You bastard. Gue Di was exasperated at Qin Hao's failure to live up to his expectations. With a roar, he dashed toward Qin Hao's side. His blood-red palm reached past Azura and pinched Qin Hao's throat. Bang! A heavy blow accompanied Gue Di's charge, coming from Azura's side. Azura waved his sleeve, and a strong black light of slaughter shook Gue Di's body, pushing him back dozens of feet. Azura's eyes were cold again. He looked at Gue Di and said, "In front of me, who dares to touch him again?" Qin Hao was not from the world of slaughter, but he cultivated the way of slaughter. Putting aside his identity, he could be considered one of Shura's men. However, this was not the main point. When Miaoli rushed forward to block the Azura killing palm, with no regard for her own safety, he was deeply hurt. Once upon a time, he was just like Miaoli. He wanted to stand in front of the son of God of Light and block that attack for Yingsha. He would rather die, as long as Yingsha lived. When it came to Miaoli and Qin Hao, it was the most realistic portrayal. If he could do it all over again, Shura believed that he would do the same as Miori. But he did not have the chance. He did not want to see his regret fall on these poor people. Fourth brother, you are really muddle-headed. You, Limo Master said coldly. I don't care if he's muddle-headed or if he has a change in temperament. In short, as long as this person still uses the power of slaughter, he's one of my people. If he wants to die, he'll die on my Azura mountain. Anyone who dares to touch him will be my mortal enemy. Shura's voice was incomparably firm and cold, just like his determination to kill Qin Hao just now. However, his mentality had already changed, and his determination to protect Qin Hao was also real. Huala God, Lord, gave the order. The elites of the world of slaughter immediately drew a line with the other three worlds. The gods of Mo2 formed an indestructible wall, standing between Shura and the three gods. Although Slayer was not God Lord Umo, he was God Lord Shura. He had always been loyal, and he had unconditionally. And he released his sky wheel. Sky wheel, the black light of the sky wheel contained. Was black light, God Lord God. God Lord God Lord. God Lord. Shura was Shura God Lord. He knew Shura's temper. Once he made up his mind, he would not change it. If they insisted on attacking Qin Hao, they would definitely start a war with Shura. Honestly speaking, although they were not convinced, Huang Quan and the others clearly knew that they were no match for Azura. Even if Azura was only one of his souls here, who could guarantee that after they touched Qin Hao, the evil face and Azura's true body that was tied to the Iron Throne in the depths of the Azura Palace wouldn't go crazy and attack their nest? Shura's injuries from the battle with the Son of God of Light were not fake. If he really went crazy, he would definitely turn Lord's nest upside down. They would not be able to stop him. Forget it. Yellow Spring waved his hand. You make the decision, but I have to remind you of something. That kid provoked June Mo. He's a jinx. You have to pay attention to the counterattack of the Tianzhou divine domain. After the battle at the Ghost Nest training ground, anyone could see Junmo's expression when he left. He would definitely come again. At that time, as he had said, he hoped that Yellow Spring and the others would not interfere. He also hoped that Shura would not do anything stupid. But now, Shura seemed to have done something stupid. Big brother, thank you, Shura said. This was the first time he had thanked them sincerely. Yellow Spring was startled, and his expression was a little unnatural. He was used to Shura's ruthlessness, so his words made him feel warm. How boring. After all, we are brothers of the same bloodline. It seems that Big Brother is also on your side. What else can we say? Guadi also gave up attacking. Lord Yumo stared fiercely at Qin Hao, who was at the back of the Massacre World's formation. He was extremely unwilling. However, when his gaze moved to Miori, the fierceness in his heart seemed to have loosened. They were too similar. Facing a soul that looked so similar to his sister, not to mention Shura God Lord, who was unwilling to attack, even Lord Yumo, who was devouring souls, felt an inexplicable sense of heartache. Hong Long. Suddenly, a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering boom reverberated through the vast universe from the direction they had come from. The sound was extremely strong. They were now in the hinterland of the ancient Nether region, which was still some distance away from the God world. However, the sound still reverberated clearly in their eardrums, and the weak divine guards felt their blood boil. What's going on? Yellow Spring was shocked. Gue Di frowned tightly, feeling that something bad had happened. Something happened. Ji Xiang turned around, his deep eyes looking in the direction of Shura Foam. His expression was unusually solemn. Jun Mo brought a very troublesome person. He is currently being held up by Wu Xiang. I have to go back immediately. This. Yellow Spring was tongue-tied. Speaking of which, Jun Mo really acted quickly. However, how troublesome was this troublesome person that could come from Fourth Brother's mouth? Return to the God world, Slayer shouted. The Slayer roared. Soon after, the God generals and God guards of the Slaughter world quickly gathered into a group. You brat, hurry up and come over. Mo2 shouted at Qin Hao. The situation had changed. Now, Shura God was the only one they could rely on, and only Shura could protect him. Junior brother, follow them. Miori's soul became weaker, and the halo she emitted was very thin. She left behind a sentence and went back into Qin Hao's wheel light. Miori felt that Shura was very strange, but he could be trusted. Besides, Qin Hao had no other choice. Qin Hao took a deep breath, stepped up, and used the deity steps to return to the Massacre World's formation. Although his evil aura was still emitting cold Massacre Dao will, he had returned to his original appearance. Let's go, Ji Xiang said. Said Ji Xiang. The black godly light on Slayer's body swept out and condensed the entire team. Like a pitch-black arrow piercing through the universe, they flew back to Azura Foam at full speed. Shura's tone was very solemn. This situation was very rare, and Slayer could understand his master's mood. Big brother, should we go after them? Guadi moved closer to Yellow Spring. Let's go take a look, said Yellow Spring. He also wanted to see the troublesome person that Fourth Brother mentioned. Could he be stronger than the supreme level? Godly Master, what should we do? A demon spirit general floated beside you, Mo Master, and watched the people of the three realms disappear. Let's go and take a look. Fourth Brother provoked someone he shouldn't have. It's easy to get involved in this mess. Maybe he needs our help. Mo Master recalled Ingsha's appearance. If Fifth Sister was still alive, she wouldn't want anything to happen to Shura. Chapter 2198. Wulin Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The great enemy suppresses the peak at the core of the Slaughter world, Azura Foam. In the dark sky, beams of calamity light wriggled like centipedes. At that moment, two majestic armies of the godly court were in front of Azura Foam, making the already dull Slaughter world even more oppressive. The suffocating atmosphere was suffocating. On the left was a great army with godly might. A noble throne was placed in front of the army, and Jun Mo was leaning on it, full of grace and elegance. Beside him was God, Lord Shangji, the strongest person below the godly king level in the primordial domain. He stood with his hands behind his back, and his calm eyes revealed great confidence. As his robe fluttered, the godly will of desolation was faintly discernible. On the right side of Jun Mo was someone who could stand side by side with Shangji. His face was extremely dignified, and his solemn expression had the arrogance of someone who looked down on the godly path of the myriad domain. This person was the right-hand man of Tian Zhao, godly king. He was also one of the protectors, and his name was Sky Supervisor. Sky Supervisor's cultivation was also unfathomable. Although his name wasn't as well known in the primordial domain as Shangji, anyone who had seen him fight knew that he wasn't much weaker than Shangji. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stayed in Tian Zhao Palace and accompanied Tian Zhao, godly king, for so long. Only the truly strong could be associated with the strong. Those who dared to get close to the godly king must have extraordinary strength. For this trip, Shangji and Sky Supervisor were Junmo's trump cards. With the two of them here, even if Azura and Hades joined forces, Junmo dared to look at the situation with a smile. As for Funwei and Xianqi, they were just a little more colorful. Junmo didn't have high hopes for second-level godlords. After all, his opponent today was the son of Underworld God King. This time, the Heavenly Mandate Divine Region didn't send many Divine Masters. There were only 4 of them, and their extravagance wasn't as grand as the time when they destroyed the Sword World. However, their foundation was solid, and it was even stronger than the last time. Tian Du alone could fight against 10 Divine Masters. If they only relied on this to crush a former God King faction, it would naturally not be enough. Therefore, Junmo invited another Divine Prince, the son of the Yunzhe Holy King, Tamanaji. On the right side of the army of the Heavenly Mandate God Domain, the army of the Immortal Court of the Cloud Pool Divine Realm stood majestically, emitting a holy white light. The formation was strict and full of a sense of holiness. There were not many God Masters around Tamanaji, only 3. Aside from God Master Heavenly Sound, whom Qin Hao had met before, there was also an old man called the Jade Void Emperor. This person's name was Emperor, but his cultivation level was at the Divine Master level. He was like the Sword World's legendary Sword Emperor. However, among the 3 Divine Masters, there was an important figure in the Yunzhe Divine Realm, God Bai. God Bai's name in the Yunzhe Divine Realm was not inferior to the upper extremity of the primeval world. His status was the same as Sky Supervisor's, and he was also the right-hand man of the Yunzhe Holy King. Even the noble Tamanaji had to respectfully address God Bai as Uncle Bai. God Master Heavenly Sound, Jade Void Emperor, and God Bai were the leading experts of the Yunzhe Sacred Realm. At this moment, Tamanaji's face was filled with impatience. Ever since the Battle of Sword World, when Junmo had used the Tian Zhao Divine Seal to intimidate the crowd and show his determination to obtain the Reincarnation Mirror, Tamanaji had been very unhappy even though he had retreated. Today, Junmo had taken the initiative to invite him and promised that after obtaining the Reincarnation Mirror, he would give it to Tamanaji to use first. When his cultivation level reached the Divine Master level, he would give it to the Tian Zhao Divine Realm. Tamanaji gladly agreed. As a Divine Prince, he lacked cultivation level to be able to help improve his Divine Marks and Divine Path power. There was no reason to refuse. Moreover, the 4 Divine Realms of the Underworld were no longer as glorious as when the Underworld King was alive. If he joined forces with Junmo, how could the 2 Divine Kings not be able to take them down? However, after arriving at Azura Peak, Junmo had been delaying and refusing to take action, which made Tamanaji unhappy. It's best if we don't fight with Azura on this trip. You don't want your people to be injured, right? Junmo looked at Tamanaji. Did he really think Azura was made of paper? Qin Hao was not here at the moment. Junmo had already heard about this from the evil minister. The evil minister's attitude was to let them wait. When Ji Xiang returned from the hinterland of the underworld, he would give Junmo an explanation. Actually, what explanation could he give? He was just delaying it. Every soul separated from the path of Azura's killing had a telepathic connection with each other and could communicate with each other through their souls. The evil minister could sense everything that happened at the underworld gate with Ji Xiang, including the changes in his mood. Similarly, Junmo had led the army to suppress Azura foam. Ji Xiang had also seen everything through the eyes of the evil image from the nether region. In fact, before Qin Hao opened the underworld gate, Junmo had already arrived with his people. Ji Xiang had told the evil minister to delay as much as possible. In the process, he wanted to seize Qin Hao's emo, earth-godly power first. Unexpectedly, Miori's appearance disrupted Ji Xiang's plan and restrained his greed and ambition. The evil minister was still delaying, but he still listened to Ji Xiang's plan. He knew what Ji Xiang was thinking. With Miori's appearance, even if Ji Xiang returned with Qin Hao, he would not hand him over to Jun Mo. A fierce battle was unavoidable in the midst of this. I have 90% of Azura's power, and you have 90% of your original body's divinity. Ingsha is a calamity you cannot overcome. The evil minister stood alone at the entrance of Azura Palace as he faced the two armies of godly kings and felt the terrifying power emanating from Shangji, Tiandu, and Bai Shun. His expression did not change. His path was different from Ji Xiang's, but they were the same person. He actually hoped that Ji Xiang would change his mind and observe the situation rationally. Against such powerful enemies brought by Jun Mo and Tamanaji, fighting was undoubtedly suicide. However, Ji Xiang's thoughts could basically determine the original body's intentions. 90% of Azura's divinity was made up of Ji Xiang. Therefore, the evil minister could not do anything that went against the original body's will, because that was Azura's true thoughts. Now, all he could do was follow the original body's wishes and protect this godly world. If he had to fight, the evil minister would use 90% of his power to open the path of massacre for Azura. I've been waiting for a long time. Tamanaji's eyes were gloomy as he spoke indifferently. Previously, Jun Mo had said that he was willing to give Azura face and wait, but there had to be a limit, right? If they continued to wait, when would it end? Would they have to wait for 100,000 years? Then what was the point of having the Mirror of Samsara? Your Highness Azura, as a guest, I have to show due respect to your path peak. However, Your Highness, how long do you need to wait? Jun Mo had to take care of Tamanaji's feelings. Soon, the evil minister raised his head and faced the two armies. Huh? Tamanaji laughed dryly. It was the same sentence again. He had repeated it no less than 3 times. I've heard that the Azura's divinity once competed with the current divine king of light. Just now, Shangji and Your Highness tested each other, but I couldn't see the difference in strength. Since you want to wait, why don't the two of you exchange another blow? At this time, Godbai, who was sitting beside Tamanaji, said coldly. Shangji looked over and glanced at Godbai. He said calmly, the name of Godbai of the Yunza divine realm is known throughout the myriad worlds. All the forces in the Archean world admire you. Why don't Godbai and God Azura exchange blows and broaden my horizons? The Yunza divine realm wanted him to take the lead and exhaust Azura's divinity. It was a good idea, but Shangji was not fooled. Chapter 2199. Wulin Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Hand over. Of course, I'm not as good as Shang-Ji, Godly Master, and Tian Du, said White God. Glancing at the majestic being to the right of Jun Mo, Tian Du turned a blind eye to that, as if he hadn't heard anything. Wu Xiang stood in front of Azura Palace, looking at the 2 top-tier great beings from the godly king powers. He sneered inwardly. They seemed to be in cahoots, but they didn't want to waste their power. This was a good thing for Azura Foam. Thus, the situation continued to be in a stalemate. White God and Shang-Ji kept talking to each other. Jun Mo pretended to be polite, and Tamanaji became more and more anxious. Unfortunately, neither side really attacked Azura Foam. After all, they didn't know how much power Azura God had left. However, the stalemate didn't last long. A beam of black godly light pierced through the void space like an arrow, and a group of elite figures landed on Azura Feng's dojo. When the group of figures appeared, Jun Mo and Tamanaji stood up at the same time. They looked over and saw the silver-haired young man in the crowd. It was none other than Qin Hao. You're indeed hiding in the massacre world, said Jun Mo, whose polite face became ferocious. His eyes were filled with murderous intent and resentment. After the battle in the Sword World, he had always thought that Qin had been stranded in the wilderness, and the sky, eye opened by the godly king's seal, couldn't be wrong. However, Junimo had repeatedly come to investigate and search, trying to force Qin how to come out, but to no avail. At that time, he had been very conflicted, and he had once doubted himself. However, after Ghost Nest probing, he was completely convinced that Qin Hao was in the massacre world, and he was very close to Azura. Now, his guess had become reality. Azura God, please hand him over. Tamanaji looked down at the exit coldly. He glanced at Ji Xiang and felt his aura. Why was it so similar to Wu Xiang's? Two Azura gods? Tamanaji shook his head and found that it wasn't an illusion, but it didn't matter. He only wanted Qin Hao, or more precisely, the mirror of reincarnation on Qin. At this moment, after Qin Hao returned to his original appearance, he met Jun Mo's gaze. Looking at the Cloud Pool Immortal Army and the Tian Zhao Army, his heart trembled slightly. No wonder. Translation, 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 translation. Translation, 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 translation. Qin Hao spread out his immortal will and glanced at Tian Du, who was next to Yu Liuji, and Bai Shun, who was next to him. He found that the aura of those two deities was very close to that of a superior deity, which showed how powerful their cultivation was. Even if they hadn't comprehended the desolation intent, they weren't far from it. They had at least reached the limit of the peak of the divine master realm. Other than them, there was also Fenwei, Xin Qi, Tianin, and another elderly divine master. 3 great gods, second only to divine kings, and 4 secondary divine masters. Such a lineup was truly astonishing. Moreover, the immortal army sent by the heavenly Zhao divine realm and the immortal army sent by the immortal realm of the Yunzi divine realm were the best of the best. Junimo and Tamanaji had obviously put in a lot of effort. Compared to the battle in endless godly domain, the enemies Azura Feng faced today were even more terrifying. Senior, Qin Hao said to Ji Xiang Azura. Shut up, Ji Xiang said lifelessly. His eyes did not even look at Qin Hao. From now on, without my order, you are not to say a word. The forces of 2 great divine kings were pressuring them, and their lineup was so strong that even if Ji Xiang had more tricks up his sleeve, it would still be useless. However, this did not mean that he was afraid. On the contrary, there was no fear in the Azura god's eyes. Just like how there was no fear in the hearts of all living beings in the world of slaughter, there was only slaughter. Death was where they truly belonged. Understood. Qin Hao lowered his head slightly and sighed inwardly. This scene was very similar to the one in Ghost Nest Dojo. Back then, Azura had also warned Qin Hao not to act rashly without his orders. In the end, Qin Hao had not listened. Today, Azura Feng was not in Ghost Nest, and Junimo was surrounded by even more great beings. Even if Qin Hao listened to Azura this time, it would still be difficult for Azura to come up with a countermeasure. Ji Xiang and Ji Xiang looked at each other silently. Then Ji Xiang stepped back and let Ji Xiang take charge of the situation. In terms of strength, 2 Ji Xiang were no match for 1 Ji Xiang. However, Ji Xiang also had his shortcomings. For example, he was not as good as Ji Xiang when it came to stabilizing the morale of the army and rallying people. Your Highnesses, why have you come here? Ji Xiang asked, even though he already knew the answer. The path of killing is really mysterious. I can't even tell which one is the real Azura god. Junimo sighed and shook his head. Then his eyes flashed, and he pointed at Qin Hao in the center of the dojo. Azura, let's not mince words. This person is from the Archean world and is my mortal enemy. He also took my chaotic, godly weapon for no reason. The enmity between us is not something you can resolve with just a few words. Your Highness Junimo must be joking, Ji Xiang said with a cold smile. He is from the slaughter world and cultivates my path of killing. How did he become from the Archean world? Azura, don't force me. The last god master who talked nonsense with me was already dead. The viciousness in Jun Mo's eyes intensified. Hand him over. I won't start a war with the slaughter world, and I don't want to make you an enemy. It's the same for His Highness you. But if you insist on doing this and want to sacrifice the lives of all the creatures in the world to stand up for this kid, then I can only be merciless. Jun Mo had destroyed a world before. He did not care about destroying a second god world, even if it was once a god king's force. Yunzhe generals. Tamanaji raised his arm high. Buzz. In the void, the Yunzhe army, which was in a square formation, took a step forward in unison. Rays of dazzling heavenly wheel radiance bloomed at the same time. The mighty divine light radiated for thousands of miles, illuminating half of the massacred divine realm. He had once given Qin Hao a chance, but he did not cherish it. Since that was the case, Tamanaji would also be an executioner. In order to get the reincarnation mirror, he did not mind staining his hands with blood. Who is making a fuss here? People who don't know would think that some wild dog has jumped out. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Rays of divine light descended from the sky and landed on the Shura training hall. The elites of the Yellow Springs God world, the elites of the Ghost world, and the elites of the Nether Devil world appeared in the vision of Jun Mo and Tamanaji. They formed an extremely majestic team with the Shura guards on the peak. Yellow Springs God Lord. Jun Mo frowned. Gue D and you Demon Lord had both arrived so quickly. Had they discussed it? Oh, so it's His Highness Jun Mo. Not a wild dog. Yellow Springs raised his head and shouted to the sky with his hands behind his back. His imposing body was like a sturdy statue pressing down on the training hall. However, when he saw the lineup brought by Jun Mo and Tamanaji, his heart trembled. As expected, they were worthy of being called troublesome characters by his fourth brother. Upper Extremity, Tiandu, and Godbai. These three were enough to fight against the four brothers. Moreover, they might not be at a disadvantage. After all, Shura was not the Shura at his peak. The strength of Yellow Springs and the other two was much weaker than Shura. If they were to fight, it was very likely that they would be suppressed by Upper Extremity. Yellow Springs Godlord, I trust you have been well since we last met. First of all, the voice just now is not mine. It was His Highness you of the Yun-Zhe Divine Realm. Jun Mo replied with a sullen face. Wild dog. Chapter 2200. 114 Chinese, Network Primordial Alchemy Venerable. Chapter 2200. Return Azura, a dignified divine prince being called a wild dog, was extremely insulting. How could Jun Mo accept such a label? Despite his fury, Tamanaji tried his best to suppress it. He turned to the Divine Lord of Netherworld and said loudly, Divine Lords, His Royal Highness and I are only here to take one person away. We don't want to bring trouble to those who have nothing to do with us. However, if you try to challenge the authority of the divine realm of Yunza, I'm not afraid to fight, nor will I show any mercy. Divine Lord Yellow Springs, Divine Lord Gue D, Divine Lord Umo, you must seriously think this through. The underworld no longer exists, and now that you have established your own businesses, do you want to give up your own divine world for a remnant that has nothing to do with the slaughter world? Jun Mo's lips curled into a cold smile. Isn't it good to maintain the status quo? It's not easy for the Nether Realm to keep 4 divine masters. Is it worth it to dig your own grave for an outsider? I hope the Yellow Springs divine masters can calm down and not act on impulse like the Azure divine master. While you're at it, help me persuade him. I only want Qin Hao and the mirror of reincarnation. Jun Mo was not joking. Otherwise, he would not have brought such a large force. He hoped that Huang Quan and the others would consider the consequences. Fourth bro, Yellow Springs looked at Azura. I can give you the Chaos Divine tool, but I won't give you the person. Azura Ji Xiang said seriously. This was his bottom line. Absolutely not. I must have both. Jun Mo took a heavy step forward, and the army of the Tianzhao god realm behind him also took a step forward in unison. Then why are you still talking nonsense with me? Come and fight me. Azura's black hair danced in the wind as his body floated up. The divine slaughter intent on his body grew stronger and stronger. At this time, the space suddenly became quiet. Jun Mo did not say a word. His narrowed pupils shone with sharpness. Jun Mo had inherited the tyranny and strength of God King Tianzhao, but he did not expect Azura to be even more arrogant than him. Fourth brother, is this worth it? Yellow Springs looked at the powerful Azura, his voice filled with vicissitudes. It had not been easy for the underworld to reach this point. Azura originally had the opportunity to take a step further towards the divine Tao. As long as he seized the power of the Earth God, before he returned, he should have extracted Qin Hao's strength by hook or by crook. At that time, even if he became Jun Mo's enemy, he would at least gain something. Yet now, he'd given up the opportunity to advance into the divine Tao, and he didn't hesitate to go to war with Jun Mo for the sake of the survivors of the Sword World. It was truly incomprehensible. Is it worth it? Azura's black hair fluttered in the wind as he smiled silently. Big brother, have you ever thought about the war between the underworld and the light realm back then? Was father's actions worth it? That battle caused the underworld to shatter. A glorious divine king's power was completely destroyed. Too many people died. The Azura four brothers lost too many people, including their younger sister Sha. What if they didn't start a war? Perhaps his younger sister was still alive, and the underworld was still the underworld where deities filled the sky, and all the beautiful things would not disappear. But would the underworld king still be the underworld king? No, he would become a dog under the light king's feet. From then on, the underworld god realm would submit to the light realm and become a vassal. Father must have thought about whether it was worth it or not, so he went to war with the light king. In that battle, many lives around us were lost. What I did today was purely to save a life. Azura also found it laughable. He was the synonym of the death god, and he spread slaughter and death. Today, he didn't hesitate to mobilize the power of the entire realm just to save one person. And this person didn't seem to have any important relationship with him. Fourth brother, give up on your obsession. Guadi understood why Azura had become like this. If he handed over Qin Hao, the divine soul, and Qin Hao's heavenly wheel that looked exactly like Sha would definitely be buried with him. As for the reason why Azura was so determined, it was because of Miaoli. The person that he wanted to save was not Qin Hao, nor was it even Miaoli. Instead, it was Sha, or rather, it was Azura himself. He wanted to make up for the regrets of the past, and he was trying to redeem himself. In this way, Azura's path could be released and liberated, and he could climb to a higher level. Azura guards. Azura Jixiang calmly called out. Instantly, all the murderous immortal generals and red-robed elites in the Taoist field slowly rose into the air. Countless black-robed immortal guards appeared on the originally dead and empty godly peak. More and more figures even jumped out of the huge gullies on the vast scorched land outside the peak. A large number of creatures were holding scythes that symbolized death. They marched toward Azura Peak in groups with rumbling footsteps. Seeing this, Yellow Spring, Guadi, and God Lord Umo all sighed sorrowfully. Heavenly Edict, God King Army. Jun Mo clenched his fist above his head. Cloud Pool, God Generals. Tamanaji pointed at Azura Dojo. Kill. The two divine princes called out at the same time. Immediately, space rumbled and whistled as the elites of the two divine kings viciously descended on the pitch-black and lonely divine peak like meteors. They wanted to destroy this world. Azura had already given them the order to fight. So at this moment, Jun Mo and Tamanaji showed no mercy. Kill. Azura Jixiang's body was the first to charge, but it was overtaken by a shadow behind it. It was Azura's evil face. The evil face activated the light wheel, and the boundless dark power of the great Tao enveloped the world, swallowing half the sky. The darkness surged forward like a tide, intending to crush the light of the heavenly edict army and the cloud pool immortal court. Dong! Dong! Two extremely heavy sounds broke through the air at the same time. Beside, Jun, Emo, Shangji, and Tian do advance side by side, each in a direction, and converged on Azura's wisdom face and evil face. Among all the forces in the massacre world, the divine paths of the evil face and wisdom face were undoubtedly the strongest. If they wanted to destroy the creatures in this world, Shangji and Tian would have to kill Azura's two spirits here. At this moment, Qin Hao saw two extremely majestic light wheels radiating from Shangji and Tian. The light of the great Tao covered their entire bodies, and they were completely composed of light. There was no sign of the divine veins at all. These were the experts who had comprehended or were close to the primordial will. The divine veins could no longer distinguish their strength. This power was far above that of the divine masters. Boom! Amidst the deafening sound of exploding spirits, the 8 palms collided fiercely. The upper extreme fought the evil image, while the heavenly supervisor fought the wisdom image. Terrifying ripples of light swept out from the 4 figures, sweeping across the universe and tearing space apart. At this moment, Qin Hao once again encountered the collapse of the power of the world. Because the divine power of the 4 was too strong, the massacre world could not withstand it at all. Countless mountains collapsed, and underground magma spewed into the sky. The already crisscrossed huge ravines were torn apart even more severely. The whole scene was like the end of the world. The power of the Azura god is truly astonishing. It is hard to imagine how strong he would be if he was not injured. Qin Hao watched the battle and felt the aura of the 4 great gods. Because the power of the main body was divided, and the will of the way that the wisdom face possessed was not good at fighting, it was obviously not as strong as the Tiandu's power. As soon as they exchanged blows, the difference in power was clear. The wisdom face was weaker than the Tiandu, but on the other side, the evil face and Shangji were fighting each other with divine power, and they were not at a disadvantage at all. The divine light of the great path flowed on their bodies, and the endless power seemed to be hidden in each of their bodies. They were evenly matched. These were only the 2 spirits of Azura, and their power was already so amazing. What if they returned to their peak state? At this moment, Qin Hao could imagine how tragic the battle in the underworld was. It could even destroy Azura's spiritual soul. As expected of a terrifying existence who fought with a quasi-divine king. If Azura was not severely injured by the current Light King, Shangji would not be his opponent. Junimo gasped slightly. Fortunately, he had brought the Tiandu today. With the 2 of them holding the line, Azura could not do anything. Your Highness, it would be better for you to avoid being hurt, Xianqi said as he came over. Today's battle was not as one-sided as the battle in the sword world. Azura's power was too shocking, and Xianqi understood that the 4 cultivators fighting now were far from showing their true power. No need. Junimo waved his hand. It was rare to see a battle close to the level of a divine king. As the divine prince, he needed to take this step in the future. He could not miss it. Glancing next door, Junimo said to Tamanaji, "Tamanaji, your people can't just watch, right?" They had agreed to fight together. Shangji, the Tiandu, and Azura were already fighting, but the Yunza divine realm was not moving. The Tianjiao divine realm was responsible for the fighting, but what if they got the chaotic divine implement? Chapter 22:01 Wulin Chinese Network Translator Endless Fantasy Translation Editor Endless Fantasy Translation Translator Endless Fantasy Translation Editor Endless Fantasy Translation Give me back your beauty with my ugliness, haha. Tamanaji understood what Junimo meant. He looked at the Shura guards who were fighting with the Divine King of Tianjiao. With a wave of his hand, groups of white-armored Tian Luan began to rush to the battle. He then said, "Uncle White, thank you." "You're welcome, Prince Yu." White God stood up from his chair. His white hair fluttered in the wind, and he wore a pure white robe. He put his hands behind his back and walked forward, ignoring the divine power that filled the sky. He just walked forward quietly. Everywhere he passed, countless black-robed Shura guards exploded. They were killed by his divine will. If this goes on, the slaughtering world will be finished. Nether clenched his fist slightly. Shanji and Tion, Duke had already put a lot of pressure on Shura. Now that God White had entered the Matrix, no one in the slaughtering world could compete with him. Although the Slayer was not bad, it was still far from the level of Shanji, Tiandu, and God White. The reality was just as Nether had guessed. Not long after God White entered the Matrix, the Slayer went up to meet him. The pitch-black Tianluan was released, and its aura was like that of Shura. Immediately, the Slayer went toward God White, but it only stopped him once. Then, it was constantly suppressed by God White's aura. No matter how it attacked, it could not shake him at all. How stupid. Guadi's chest was filled with resentment. He watched his former brother being killed. Even if he did not have a good impression of Shura, the feeling was not good. Why did he not want to hand him over? It was fine if he did not want to hand him over. The Earth Divine power was so easy to get, but Shura did not want to take it. Elder Nether, Elder Guadi, are the three of you going to watch your former brother be killed without doing anything? At this moment, Qin Hao shouted at the three of them. You have no right to speak here, Guadi said ruthlessly. Did he want them to go up and help? What could he change? There were still other divine lords in the Tianzhou Divine King Army and the Yunza Divine Realm Army. Even if Nether and the others were to enter the formation, they would still be restrained. As a result, the Netherworld, the Ghost Realm, and the Nether Devil World might perish. Yellow Spring and the others weren't willing to watch with folded arms. The premise was that Azura could withstand the opponent's peak divine Tao. If the three divine masters entered the formation, they could break the delicate balance of the battle. Most importantly, based on the current situation, Jixiang would not be able to last long in the hands of the Sky Supervisor. There was no point in fighting a battle with an answer. Creak! Qin Hao clenched his fists. He was really cold-blooded. If it wasn't Jun Mo and Temenaji who came today, but the Radiant God King instead, what would the seniors do? Miao Li, whose soul was already weak, once again left Qin Hao Ian's wheel. She floated in front of God, Lord Netherworld, and stared at him. Ing Sha. Yellow Spring looked at Miori's face in a daze. So similar. Unfortunately, you are not Ing Sha. Who I am is not important. Senior Yellow Spring, please answer this, Junior. What if it was the Radiant Divine Realm Army that suppressed Azura today? Miori continued. This. Yellow Spring was conflicted. The meaning was different. If the Radiant God King came, it would definitely be to destroy the four realms. However, Jun and Mo only attacked the Massacre World. As long as Yellow Spring and the others didn't enter the formation, the Radiant Divine Realm wouldn't be affected. Haha, this Junior understands. I think the reason Mingzhan lost was because you brothers were not on good terms. Miori sneered. How could they not be defeated if they didn't help when they were dying? What do you know? Yellow Spring's dignified face glared angrily. In the Battle of the Underworld, they had done their best. Their mistake was that the Radiant Eldest Son suddenly broke through to the God King realm and crushed the Underworld. At that moment, not only did Ing Sha die, Azura's soul was also scattered. How could the Underworld be a match for a God King without the Underworld King? Don't think that just because you look similar to Ing Sha, you can bewitch us into intervening. Let me tell you, there is no if in this world. As long as Father's dark incantation is still present, the Radiant King will not come. Guadi said, but you too, think about what will happen to you if Azura is defeated. Senior sister, these three people are inhumane. There is no need to talk nonsense with them. Qin Hao could see that perhaps Yellow Spring and the others also wanted Azura to die. Big brother, second brother, go help fourth brother, go help fourth brother, I beg you. Inexplicably, Miori seemed to be possessed by a soul. She grabbed Yellow Spring's wide sleeves with both hands and felt her knees, crying on the spot. You. Yellow Spring was so shocked that he suddenly trembled. He looked down at Miori, at the face that was so similar, as if Sha was kneeling in front of him. His heartstrings tightened, and he desperately told himself that the one under his feet was not Fifth Sister, it was fake. Yellow Spring wanted to hide. He wanted to break free from Yuri's hands. But the more he did so, the more his state of mind was deeply affected. Big brother, calm down. She is not Sha. Guidi's eyes were red, and his throat gradually became choked with sobs. Big brother, big brother, big brother. Help fourth brother, help him. Yuri cried loudly, and the more she cried, the louder her voice became. Her voice even reached the battlefield, affecting Azura's evil image and wisdom image, causing them to burst out even more ruthlessly and crazily. In fact, Miaoli didn't know Sha. She didn't know anything about the other's personality and words. She only knew that Sha was a close relative of the 4 former princes of Ming. From those words, she could vaguely see that Huang Quan and the others loved their sister very much. In the current situation, if Yellow Spring did not enter the array, Azura alone would not be able to hold on for long. As Qin Hao's senior sister, in order to let her junior brother live, she could only shamelessly pretend to be someone else's sister. Whether Yellow Spring admitted it or not, in short, crying was the right thing to do. Until the crying reached the pain of their souls, until they could not bear it, and helped Azura. If Azura won, Qin Hao could live. The cries were like sobs. Tears blurred Muri's eyes, and it was Yellow Spring's eyes. He looked at the soul that was similar to his sister kneeling at his feet. He knew it was fake, but he believed it was real because the resemblance was too great. Finally, after repeated crying and begging, an extremely oppressive roar exploded from Azura's dojo. The flesh on Yellow Spring's body fell off one by one amidst Muri's cries, revealing a huge purple-gold skeleton filled with a destructive aura. For a moment, she tried to escape, afraid that her ugly appearance would frighten the people she cared about. However, if this ugly appearance could save the remaining beauty in her heart, so what if the world could see it clearly? Yellow Spring went berserk. The huge skeleton flew past the black-robed divine guards in the sky, lifted up the Slayer who was bitterly blocking the attack, and threw him to the back. The purple gold handbone that was as hard as steel grabbed White God's arm like a ghost. Wherever it grabbed, White God's divine power would constantly melt, followed by his clothes, and then his flesh until White God let out a hoarse scream. One of his arms turned into eerie white bones and was thrown high into the sky by Yellow Spring. Boom! The Yellow Spring bone guards who were guarding the road followed the Divine Lord's movement and erupted with the power of the bone path, turning into skeletons of all shapes and sizes. They carried spears and machetes and threw themselves into the battle. Yellow Spring Realm, enter the battle formation. Second brother, I beg you, second brother. The souls that were on the verge of collapse begged one by one. Their white palms clutched Guidi's pants tightly. Muri saw blood seeping out from Guidi's eyes. Why do you have to torture us like this? If only you were Sha. If only you called me big brother like now. There was no need to kneel. Whatever you want, second brother can give it to you. I can pick any star. Whatever Azura can do, I could do it too. Blood flowed out from his 7 orifices. A cold wind came like a wave. Guidi's body was covered in blood and flesh. The rotten smell filled the air. The deformed body that was hidden under a normal person's body was revealed. Chapter 2202 114 Chinese Network Translator Endless Fantasy Translation Editor Endless Fantasy Translation Translator Endless Fantasy Translation Editor Endless fantasy translation waiting for an opportunity to kill the stench of corpses swept across the battlefield with the chilly wind. The blood-red light formed by the curse surrounded Guidi. The ordinary facial features that he tried to maintain instantly became extremely terrifying, like a rotten corpse monster. Shura was the synonym of death, spreading death, blood, and killing. Guidi was the source of all things fear, symbolizing disaster and misfortune. At this moment, he stretched out his bloody and festering palm and gently helped Muri up. He left a bloody footprint with each step, dragging the mountain of corpses on his back, and walked toward the battlefield of Shura foam. There was no if in the world. Muri was nodding Shah, so she should cherish the present. Otherwise, the tragedy would repeat itself, and the next one to die would be Shura. After many years, when Gue Di recalled today, would he fall into regret and guilt for not lending a helping hand? Maybe, so one regret was enough. He couldn't saving Shah, but he could fight side by side with Shura. On the training field, the corpses revealed the true appearance of the ghost guards as their clothes were torn apart. They spat out obscure curses and followed Gue Di's footsteps into the immortal army of Yunzhe, immortal realm. In an instant, minced meat flew everywhere, and miserable howls sounded everywhere. The blood was like an ocean reflected in one's eyes. The cursed power of the Ghost Realm's elites was absorbed into the bright and holy heavenly wheel of Yunzhe, immortal realm's will, corroding their bodies, infecting their will, and evoking the long-buried fear of countless people. The entrance of the Netherworld realm and the Ghost Realm caused a change in the battle situation. The Shura guards, who were originally weak, received great help and reduced the pressure caused by the two immortal kings. Looking at Gue Di, who was fighting with the Jade Mirage Emperor, Qin Hao and Yuri's side, death and fear were not completely cold. Compared to the real mortal world, ghosts and skeletons were more humane. At least when the calamity came, Qin Hao and Yuri saw more abandonment and survival in the mortal world. Few were like Huang Quan and Gue Di, who knew that they might not be able to change anything, but still chose to stand by Shura's side in the end. This was not because of Muri's disguise as Ingsha. In fact, it was because of the unbreakable bond between them. If you also call me third brother, perhaps I will consider making a move. God Lord Umo stood alone on the side, quietly waiting for Muri. However, the other party did not open her mouth to ask for help. Why was he treated differently from Huang Quan and Gue Di? People often say that a human's heart is uglier than a ghost. In my opinion, Sir Divine Master, you are even more unbearable than a human's heart. You can still be so calm when you see your three brothers in danger. Tell me, how cold are you? Muri looked at God. Lord Umo, I will not beg you. If you want to enjoy the fall of Shura, Huang Quan, and Gue Di, then enjoy it together. After all, I'm not Ingsha. To be honest, Muri had nothing to do with Shura. Shura, Huang Quan, and Gue Di were Umo's blood brothers. It was up to him whether he saved them or not. You win. God Lord Umo waved his hand. The demon soul guards that had been waiting for a long time all rushed forward, stabbing into the side of the Cloud Pool Divine Realm's immortal army like a shiny black knife. Taking a step in the air when he passed by Muri, God Lord Umo looked back at Muri. To be honest, you're not as cute as Ingsha. Only the people I respect the most have the chance to see my cuteness. Muri revealed a faint smile. Can I gain your respect by killing a few divine masters? That will depend on third brother's ability. Muri changed the way she addressed him. God Lord Umo's deep eyes shone with an excited light. His loose robes fluttered in the wind as he charged towards the rear of the Heaven Edict God King army. Jun Mo was currently watching the battle with great interest. Senior sister, you are amazing. Qin Hao was sincerely impressed. What kind of people were Huang Quan, Gue Di, and Umo? With just a few words, senior sister was able to incite them into joining the battle. She looked like she was willing to sacrifice herself for the greater good. Don't be so smug. This is all senior sister can do for you. The outcome of the battle is hard to predict. If you want to break out of this predicament, relying on Shura and the others is not enough. You have to rely on yourself. Muri knew that Huang Quan and the others were willing to help not only because of her. Even if they joined the battle, they would at most share some of Shura's pressure. Junmo's lineup was extremely strong. With Taminaji's cooperation, every one of Huang Quan's members was dangerous. This was a true battle between tigers and wolves. I understand. Qin Hao nodded. As long as an opportunity presented itself, he would do his best to create a chance to turn the situation around. He did not have extravagant hopes of killing Jun Mo and forcing back the armies of the two divine kings. Muri's illusory soul did not return to Qin Hao's wheel of light. Her cultivation was not enough, and she did not have a divine body, so she could not provide any substantial help to Qin Hao. However, she believed that her junior brother would definitely be able to survive this calamity. Perhaps after this, the situation Qin Hao would face would completely change. Boom, boom, boom. The void cried out incessantly. With Huang Quan delaying White God and Gue Di and Yu Mo delaying the other divine lords, Shura could finally go all out. His battle with his superiors and Heaven Supervisor was extremely intense. Wu Xiang possessed 90% of the main body's battle strength. Up until now, there was still no clear difference in strength between him and his superiors. Their divine Tao auras were maintained at an absolute balance. No one could gain the slightest advantage. Of course, Xiang was not good at fighting. Compared to the other divine Tao heavenly wheels, he was shockingly strong. However, he was facing Heaven Supervisor, the right-hand man of the Divine King. To a large extent, Heaven Supervisor was only allowed to stay in the Heavenly Edict Palace as a sparring partner, relieving the Divine King of Heavenly Edict's boredom. After all, in the endless life of the Divine King, he also needed to add joy to battle. From this, one could imagine just how strong Heaven Supervisor was. His usual sparring partner was the current Divine King of Heavenly Edict. Xiang was at a disadvantage from the very beginning. If not for God Shura's profound foundation, it would have been very difficult for him to last until now. As for winning, there was no hope at all. However, as Divine Lord Yellow Springs entered the battle against White God, Shura's servant, Slayer, was released. Seeing that Xiang was no match for God Shura, Slayer, who is known as the uncrowned ruler of the Slaughter World, immediately rushed over. The two of them worked together to resist God Shura's attacks. So this is God Shura, who is said to be able to contend with the Divine King of Light. How disappointing. Tao flowed around Heaven Supervisor's body. Resplendent light formed a vast wheel of light. A terrifying wave of light in the shape of a millstone appeared in his palm, and he hurled it at Xiang and Slayer. As it spun, it killed everything in its path, including the Shura guards and red-clothed elites, and all of them exploded without leaving behind a single soul. King, be careful. Slayer was the first to meet the attack. His calm face couldn't calm the great waves surging in his heart. Heaven Supervisor's cultivation was so strong that he was very close to the primordial Tao. If I was at my peak, and not just a soul, I would have been able to crush him. Xiang knew just how strong Heaven Supervisor was. He was indeed extraordinary, but there was still an insurmountable gap between him and the Underworld War. Seeing the peerlessly domineering millstone of light spinning toward him, Xiang reached out and pulled Slayer back. They couldn't rely on their own strength to take this attack head-on. At the same time, the mysterious light of the mirror bloomed in his palm. As the light grew bigger and bigger, it finally reached the height of a person and stood firmly in front of Xiang. The mirror of reincarnation, the chaos divine artifact, was born with the creation of the primordial Tao. It possessed the most ancient power of the primordial Tao, and its abilities were far more than just the Tao of reincarnation. Qin Hao didn't know much about the divine Tao, and he didn't have the ability to open many chaos divine artifacts. Xiang was different. He was a soul of Shura, and he was a part of divinity. Shura was able to reach his current level of cultivation because all of his Tao was branded in this soul. Compared to Qin Hao, Xiang knew more about how to use the chaos divine artifact, and he even knew how to use it in battle. Xiang pressed his hands on the back of the mirror, ignoring the pleading of the old man's face that appeared on the mirror. He poured his slaughter Tao will into it, causing the reincarnation mirror to explode with an extreme black light. The black light shot out and collided with the spinning millstone of light. There was a deafening boom in the void, and a terrifying shockwave swept out. Xiang and Slayer were sent flying, and Heaven's supervisor was hit by the mirror light. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body slid a few dozen meters away. Chaos divine artifact. Heaven's supervisor couldn't calm down, and his divine will was fluctuating. He had intentionally mocked Ji Xiang just now to provoke Shura's soul. Of course, he knew how terrifying Shura's complete body was. It was no joke to be able to compete with the light eldest son quasi-god king. The reason he did this was to agitate Ji Xiang so that he could find a weakness in the shortest time possible so that he could kill him. However, Ji Xiang took out a chaos divine artifact, which undoubtedly increased the difficulty of defeating him. Reincarnation Mirror. Junimo and Tamanaji looked over at the same time. It was just as they had imagined. Shura was protecting Qin Hao because of the chaos divine artifact. You want to use the Reincarnation Mirror's Reincarnation Great Tao to train an elite army? Junimo sneered. It seemed that Shura hadn't let go of Ming Zhan's hatred and wanted to fight his way back to the light region. A blood-curdling scream pulled Junimo back to reality. He looked towards the source of the sound and found that Fen Wei's soul seemed to be pulled by a strange force. It was being forcibly pulled out of his body. Fen Wei's face was full of pain, and he was on the verge of collapse. On the side, the demon master's loose robes fluttered in the wind as he extended a hand through the air, as if covering Fen Wei's head. A perverted sneer hung from the corner of his mouth as he used his soul-devouring Tao to forcefully extract Fen Wei's soul. Tamanaji, Junimo called out. He didn't have any god lords he could use, and his Xian Qi was restricted. God Lord Tianyin, help him, Tamanaji ordered. Yes, Your Highness. God Lord Heavenly Sound slowly stepped forward, and as he walked, his body began to emit a faint ripple of sound. He waved his hand, and an incomparably gorgeous ancient zither appeared. Controlled by divine will, it seemed to play on its own. The divine laws of the great Tao formed waves that surged toward God, Lord Umo, immortal grade, 9 meridians. Lord Umo glanced at God, Lord Tianyin's divine Tao wheel. Compared to the trash in his hand, it was indeed much stronger. Moreover, God Lord Tianyin's music contained a dignified Buddha nature that countered Lord Umo. He had no choice but to give up on extracting Fen Wei's soul and focus on God, Lord Tianyin. Chapter 2203. Wulin Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Let's try underestimating one more, the rhythm intertwined in the void. Countless notes jumped out and turned into swastikas. The world was covered in golden light, forming a golden ocean. Terrifying golden waves surged and crashed into the body of God, Lord Umo. The demonic soul chi on his demonic body was baptized by the golden light and weakened. When the Buddhist music entered his ears and filled his demonic will, his demonic body became blurry as though it was about to dissipate. The great sun golden incantation of the southern heaven Buddha realm. Umo's expression changed slightly. He released the soul power of the great path from his palms. Thick black smoke enveloped his body, preventing the will from dissipating. In terms of attainment and divine power, Tianyin Master was inferior to him. Even with the addition of a useless Fen Wei, this should have been a one-sided battle. However, the Buddhist music incantation cultivated by his opponent happened to counter Umo's demonic soul path. The ancient divine Guqin had also received the blessing of a southern heaven great Buddha, making it even more powerful. As a result, Lord Umo felt a sense of being unable to use his strength. On the other side, Gue Di and Jade Mirage Emperor were also in a fierce battle. Since he was an emperor of the divine path and had the surname Tamanaji, it was obvious that Jade Mirage Emperor was a direct descendant of Yunzi, Saint King. Not only was his divine power powerful, but his attainment was also not low. There were no divine veins in his wheel of light. It was still unclear who had the upper hand between Yellow Spring and White Deity. The celestial chi was blocked by Mo Tuesday. As the elites of the four deity realms fought with the armies of the two deity kings, the area of the battle expanded. Fierce battles broke out in every corner of Azura Peak. Compared to the other divine paths, the Slaughter Path, Yellow Spring Path, Ghost Path, and Ghost Path are more extreme and different. They may have an advantage in the beginning, but as time passes and they gradually adapt, they will be overcome by their opponents. Qin Hao's eyes scanned the surroundings, and as far as his divine sense could reach, he could see every single battle. The Shura Guard's murderous nature, the indestructible Bone Path, the terror of the Ghost Path, and the strangeness of the Soul Path caused the two armies of divine kings who had just arrived in the ancient Nether region to suffer greatly. Because this was the first time they had encountered a Dao, that they had never encountered before, it was inevitable that they would be caught off guard and unable to exert their combat strength. However, this situation would not last for long. The troops brought by Jun Mo and Tamanaji were not ordinary Tianlun experts. They were also the elite troops of the Divine King. Huang Quan, Gue Di, and Umo were unable to suppress the opponent's divine master power for the time being. It was mainly up to Shura. Shura was the core power that dominated this battlefield. Qin Hao looked up. Ji Xiang and the Slayer worked together. They borrowed the power of the great Tao of reincarnation from the mirror of reincarnation to temporarily hold back the Tian Du. However, a variable appeared at this moment. Compared to before, the evil image's divine aura had weakened slightly, and it was starting to struggle against the upper level. They are all part of Shura's divine soul. Although they have inherited different abilities, they are not the original body. Qin Hao did not have a deep understanding of the Xiang killing path. It was only now that he knew that the evil image that had suddenly attacked him in the midst of the Red Coat elites was also a part of Shura's soul. He understood that power could not be maintained for long. No matter how powerful a divine spirit was, it could not escape the ancient law of balance. If the evil image could not defeat the upper level before its divine power weakened, it would be the one that would be defeated. The situation is beginning to show signs of unfavorable signs. The balance will gradually tilt as time passes. Once any of Shura, Huang Quan, Gue Di, or Umo is defeated, the disadvantage will instantly increase. Qin Hao knew that he could not just sit and wait for death. Ji Xiang had warned him not to act rashly without orders and not to say a word. But he had to do something. If this continued, it would only be a matter of time before the four divine realms were defeated. Qin Hao tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and ignored Jia Kong and Ing Luo who were blocking him. His body floated toward the battlefield in front of him. The pitch-black wheel of the great path bloomed, and the power full of destructive aura swayed with the evil spirit. Qin Hao once again turned into an evil god of the slaughter world. As his palms slowly reached out, the blood-red spear of slaughter appeared in his hand. Qin Hao thrust the spear forward, and the world was pierced by the terrifying spear aura. Countless cries and screams swept through the air. The spear aura turned into countless glaring torrents. The evil spirits danced with it and annihilated the divine armored soldiers of the Divine King army. Junimo, get out here. Qin Hao shouted loudly, and the blood spear pointed forward. His voice rolled out and roared between heaven and earth. In the battle of the infinite divine realm, Junimo entered the matrix with the sky splitter and killed the swordsman as if there was no one there, including College Chief Nan. No one could withstand the power of the staff. At that time, it was to provoke Qin Hao to fight him. Today, Qin Hao was giving him a taste of his own medicine. He pointed his spear at the Divine King army. Did Jun Mo dare to fight? Loser. Jun Mo looked from afar with a trace of disdain. In the palm of his hand, the divine aura of the great path slowly condensed into the shadow of his staff. He lifted the staff and was about to step out to fight. Your Highness, this man's divine power is extremely evil and cannot be compared to before. You are the son of the Divine King, and your body is priceless. You cannot be tempted by him. Let me do it for you. said a divine general in dazzling divine armor beside him. Junimo stopped. His gloomy eyes stared at Qin Hao's figure. He said, "Don't kill him. I want him alive." "As you command." The divine general flung his cloak and stepped out. His figure instantly separated from the army. Like an extremely fast meteor, he flew across the vast battlefield. In the blink of an eye, he descended on Qin Hao's head. "Bastard, why aren't you surrendering?" He raised his palm and slammed it down. The palm print, intertwined with divine light, was like a towering mountain. It was as if a part of the sky had smashed down. Qin Hao raised his head and glanced coldly. He extended an index finger. The condensing pill finger passed down in the ancient Alchemy Lord clan evolved into the golden finger that could kill enemies. Evil power snaked along his arm. The evil spirits in the wheel of light that contained murderous intent howled. It was as if countless ferocious souls were injected into this finger. Immediately, an evil light flashed at the tip of his finger. An incomparably sharp ray of light shot up into the sky and pierced through everything. The mountain palm print that was pressing down collapsed, and the will of the great path disintegrated. The ray of light sank into the divine armor that protected the body of the divine general. It pierced through the divine general's divine spirit and went through his back. It flew further into the sky. No, the sorrowful cry could not stop the arrival of death. The moment the divine spirit pierced through, the armor of the Tianzhao divine general, who had been pressing down on Qin Hao's head, suddenly shattered. His body was penetrated by the countless rays of light from his body. He exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Chapter 2204. Wooling Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Things were different now. Who gave you the confidence to have 5 immortal-grade meridians? Qin Hao slowly retracted his finger, still staring at Junimo. A perfect celestial wheel with 3 meridians could crush 5 meridians of the great celestial wheel. Junimo had killed Dinan with 1 blow. But at this time, the Tianzhao divine general who had volunteered was stronger than Dinan. He had 5 immortal-grade meridians and was a guard from the Tianzhao palace. He had the potential to become a divine master, but he was still killed by Qin Hao with 1 finger. It was enough to imagine how Junimo felt. He has 3 immortal-grade meridians and is so powerful. A group of divine generals behind Junimo clenched their fists in cold sweat. It seems that he didn't just hide in the world of massacre. He also went through a lot of hard training and is qualified to see my true power. Junmo's figure slowly floated forward. He first defeated Yin Shuo of the Star Palace, then easily killed a divine general with 5 immortal-grade meridians. He used to be a lowly ant with only 1 divine pattern, but with the power of the reincarnation mirror and Azura, he had quietly grown to an extraordinary level. Vaguely, Junimo could even feel the hidden threat from Qin Hao's evil intent. "Your Highness!" A divine general saw Junimo move and wanted to stop him. Qin Hao's growth was too fast, and the divine power he cultivated was also very strange. His evil aura was filled with the desire to destroy, and it also contained a very strong killing intent. If something happened to Qin Hao, how would they explain it to the Tianzhao deity king? At this time, another divine general shook his head at him. Junimo had made up his mind, and no one could go against the will of the divine prince. Perhaps in his eyes, he had really regarded the survivor of the sword world as an opponent, and no one could stop him. As the divine prince, Junmo's pride did not allow him to avoid the battle, let alone be timid. Moreover, Qin Hao had always been someone he wanted to kill. Junimo could not bear to watch him grow so rapidly. He had to end him with his own hands. At this time, many divine generals and divine guards in the heavenly mandate divine domain's army had their eyes fixed on Junimo. That bastard who escaped from the sword world grew too quickly, surpassing their imaginations. They thought back to the battlefield of the Avicii divine domain. Qin Hao only had 1 divine vein was powerless against the army of god kings. Any of the divine generals here could have easily killed him back then. Now, the tables had turned. Qin Hao could easily kill any one of them, unless he had become a divine master or had 6 immortal-grade meridians, or even higher. With such battle prowess, how could the palace guards of the Tianzhou Palace not be on tenterhooks? They were afraid that something would happen to Junmo. If that really happened, they must immediately rescue Junmo and work together to annihilate Qin Hao. I thought you would shrink back and not dare to face me. Qin Hao looked at Junmo's figure floating in front of him. The two of them were only a few dozen steps apart. That noble posture of the divine prince was still the same as before. Shrink back. Junmo smiled. It seems that on the day the Avicii sword world was destroyed, there was indeed a useless person hiding behind many swordsmen. It's a pity that those swordsmen who blocked for him all died. Swordsmen can die. The sword world can be destroyed, but swordsmanship will never end. When I cut off your head, you will bleed and kneel in front of my sword, repenting to the spirits of the sword world. Qin Hao dispersed the blood-colored spear in his hand. As a flash of emerald light appeared, the great void sword floated beside him. However, compared to before, the red lotus flames around the blade had completely disappeared. He had personally destroyed the divine power of the red lotus. Without the nourishment of the fire source, the great void sword was naturally no longer the same as before. However, at this moment, a layer of pitch-black divine light covered the blade. Through the halo emitted by the divine light, one could faintly see countless evil spirits attached to the blade. They were like spirits of the dead, howling and demanding Junmo's life. Now, regardless of the appearance or the aura of the great void sword, it had become more sinister and ferocious than before. At a glance, one could not help but feel fear. Haha, don't tell me you think you can defeat me just because you defeated Silverlight? Junmo pointed at his own nose with a playful smile on his face. To be honest, he was of the same level as Silverlight Heavenly Wheel. However, there was a world of difference between their bloodline and divine power. The blood of divine, King Tianzhou, flowed in his body. The divine king's will of Tao filled his entire body. This was Junmo's unparalleled potential, endless potential. The divine king was an innate divine spirit created by chaos. His will of Tao was filled with the most primitive Hongmeng great Tao. Junmo was the same. The will of Tao he possessed was the divine king's will of Tao. Silverlight? He was just a postnatal perfect living being. When it came to his potential, he was not even fit to carry Junmo's shoes. Your growth has indeed surprised me. This is all due to the magical effect of the reincarnation mirror. Even if you have 3 bloodlines and have the same 30,000 cultivation as me, how can the 30,000 years of cultivation that you hastily forged in 100 years be compared to my refined cultivation? Junmo stretched out his sky splitter and pointed at Qin Hao's face from afar. He said majestically, "The strength of the divine prince's divine power is far beyond your imagination. I don't mind telling you kindly that the strength I used to destroy the infinite divine world was not even half of my full strength. In my eyes, you're the same type as Silverlight. Both of you are trash." Bang! The evil light reflected in his eyes. The incomparably fast figure stepped out with the heaven-ascending steps. When Junmo finished his last word, Qin Hao was already in front of him. The emerald sword light mixed with black color slashed out. The strong killing power seemed to freeze Junmo's body. When Junmo's face changed drastically, he barely dodged the sword. However, he was punched in the face by Qin Hao. His nose bled, and he rolled out in a sorry state. Sword. Qin Hao raised his divine sword to the sky. A rhythmic sound rang out in the void. It seemed that countless divine swords were released. Then, one after another, densely packed together appeared. They were like black fish scales, flashing with a dark luster. He pointed his sword, and the divine swords in the sky flew towards Junmo. The pitch-black sword light accurately pierced into the place where Junmo fell. There the mountains collapsed, and the earth split open. Terrifying black lava spewed out. The unceasing falling sword chi formed a terrifying storm of destruction. With every sword that entered, the storm grew larger and larger. It was filled with an aura of destruction. Your Highness, the divine generals of Tianzhou in the army shouted in unison. Their voices made people's hearts clench. At the same time, Tamanaji narrowed his eyes. His pupils emitted a fierce luster as he looked at the place where Junmo fell. There, the endless storm of sword chi raged, as if it could destroy the heavens. Junmo's confidence and pride had taught him a lesson in blood. His shouts also affected the hearts of many great gods and affected the entire battlefield. Shangji, Tiandu, Baishun, and even Jade Virtual Emperor all looked over in the midst of the battle. However, this action attracted the counterattacks of Azura, Huang Quan, Gui Di, and Umo. Compared to these great gods, Qin Hao's cultivation was indeed insignificant. However, in his own way, he could affect and even change the situation of the battle. In the past, when he faced the honorable Prince of God, he was indeed powerless. That powerlessness surpassed the feeling of guilt. But today, he, who was once powerless, was qualified to stand in front of the Prince of God. He took the initiative to attack. When Junmo could not defend himself, he gave him a painful blow. Chapter 22:05. The sword chi spiraled, and the sound of swords whistling through the air did not stop for a long time. The destructive light of slaughter engulfed the earth, and the crisscrossing ravines in the surroundings were affected, causing the area to expand. If not for the fact that one could still feel Junmo's aura in the storm of sword light, one would even think that he had been killed by Qin Hao in one move. This kid stole the mirror of samsara and increased his cultivation. He also cultivated the great Tao of slaughter with the help of the Azura god and cultivated the divine power of slaughter. I really don't know where his evil aura came from and where did the divine power he was good at go. An older Cloud Pool divine guard stood beside Ulyoji and suppressed Ulyoji with just one move. Among the top geniuses of the untainted land, this was something to be proud of. The sword cultivator who had escaped from the sword world was too shocking. Junmo has created a strong enemy for himself. This time, he will probably take out the true strength of the Divine Prince and take him seriously. Let's just enjoy it quietly. Tamanaji looked over and revealed a cold and sinister smile. Qin Hao did indeed have the qualifications to challenge the successor of the Divine King. His strength was rare even among the many perfect geniuses. Let's see how much trouble he can cause Junmo. If their positions were switched, Tamanaji did not dare to say that he could completely suppress Qin Hao. If he wanted to win, he would have to pay a price. Your Highness, what are you thinking? The Cloud Pool Divine Guard noticed that Tamanaji seemed to have changed. I'm thinking, how badly will Junmo be injured in this battle? Is it possible that the only son of the Divine King of Tianzhou will die here? Tamanaji's eyes became gloomier and gloomier. He hoped that Qin Hao's performance would not be too disappointing. The Cloud Pool Divine Guard's heart suddenly tightened as he looked at his young master in disbelief. He could faintly smell an unusual aura. The viciousness hidden in Tamanaji's eyes made his Divine Guard feel afraid. Wong, the black sword current of the Great Path slowly dissipated. A terrifying sword pit that was as deep as the core of the earth was exposed on the scorched earth of the Slaughter Divine Realm. It was like a huge scar that could not be erased. In the center of the sword pit, Junmo held the sky-splitting rod and covered his eyes with one hand. As the raging sword chi around him disappeared, he slowly moved his hand away and flicked the dust off his tattered clothes. Qin Hao watched everything from afar. After this attack, Junmo wasn't injured at all. Only his luxurious prince's clothes were torn in countless places. Just like what Junmo had said when he destroyed the sword world, he had used less than half of his full strength. Back then, Qin Hao had been able to injure him with only one god vein. In fact, it was mostly due to luck. Junmo had not taken it seriously. But now, The noble divine prince had gradually revealed the power of the divine king's bloodline. Even if Qin Hao had developed 3 god veins, it would be even more difficult to shake him. Are you afraid? Jun Mo smiled as he walked in the void, holding his rod as he walked toward Qin Hao. With 30,000 years of perfect cultivation, Qin Hao had the same capital as Yin Shuo. However, Yin Shuo had never had the chance to see the divine prince's true power. As expected, after all, that sword strike just now was just a casual move of mine. Qin Hao's emotions were not affected. He did not lie. That sword strike was purely filled with slaughter sword will and mixed with evil power, thus creating a terrifying storm of destruction. It was not a great path divine skill. He still had many divine skills that he had not used yet. What a strange guy. Thinking back on everything, I'm afraid that in the past, I could not have predicted that one day you would grow to this level. However, even if I had predicted it, I would still not hesitate to do it all over again. I would extract your soul and dig out your bones, banish you and Zhan Wu from the Archean realm, destroy the infinite divine realm, and chase you to the slaughter world. Because all of this was completely within my control. No matter how powerful you are, you will not be able to escape from my grasp. If I want you dead, not even the Divine King can stop me. Above Junmo's body, a noble and dazzling perfect celestial wheel appeared. Rolling divine power flowed from his palm into the sky, split a rod. At this moment, an independent universe seemed to have appeared where he was. He carried the power of the universe on his back. The sky splitter rod suddenly swung out, and the divine light of the great path extended. From a great distance, it smashed toward Qin Hao. Within the light of the rod, the void collapsed. Buzz! Qin Hao's great void sword was especially powerful. He pointed the sword above his head, and his whole body turned into a world of swords. Countless sword chi shot toward the sky. It was as if evil spirits were soaring into the sky and converging into a sword that could open the sky. Boom! The might of the rod that could destroy the void fell. This chaotic divine implement that was born in the same time and space as the divine kings contained unimaginable power. The light of the rod crushed everything. The shadow of the sword that could open the sky cracked inch by inch until it was completely crushed by the light of the rod. Then, the rod fell with a rumble and hit the place where Qin Hao was standing. Divine light flowed on Qin Hao's body. His feet moved in an ancient and mysterious way. He actually escaped from the gap between the might of the rod and was not affected by the chaotic divine implement. In the next moment, Qin Hao, who had disappeared, appeared in front of Jun Mo. Just like before, he casually slashed out with his sword. The sword light stirred up evil spirits that filled the sky. Many deformed human heads dragged long strands of evil aura. In the blink of an eye, they pounced and bit on Jun Mo's noble sky wheel. The most evil evil, the most evil evil, the thousands of resentful spirits and evil thoughts in the divine palace gathered the power of all laws. However, they were unable to devour the light wheel of the divine king's descendant. Many of the evil spirits were even killed by the aura of the divine king emitted by Jun Mo as soon as they got close. The most evil power that Yin Shuo could not avoid was ineffective against Jun Mo. Perfect sky wheels are different after all, as expected of the will of the divine king. Qin Hao gritted his teeth fiercely. The evil power was unique and almost ignored all rules and laws. Although Yin Shuo's sky wheel was perfect and was one with the great Tao, he was still a postnatal creature. However, the bloodline of the divine king was innate and contained the power of the primordial great Tao. In terms of quality, the two were completely different. As for the evil power, it belonged to the former. It was also a postnatal perfect power. It looks scary, but it's just for show. Jun Mo swung his staff again. Even the sky was about to fall under the might of his staff. Ordinary divine, path, heavenly wheels could not avoid it all. However, when he saw Qin Hao escape from the staff's shadow effortlessly, Jun Mo also gritted his teeth fiercely. The divine steps, heaven-stomping technique of the paragon of alchemy was truly disgusting. Prison circle seal. A divine king's imprint appeared on his palm. The imprint emanated a vast and sacred power. Jun Mo struck his palm at the sky. Boundless radiance gushed out and radiated in all directions along the great Tao. In the haze, streaks of scattered light seemed to form a net, sealing and imprisoning the space where Qin Hao and Jun Mo were. Back then, Jun Mo had suffered a lot from the divine steps. The prison circle was a move he learned from divine King Tianzhao. The divine king created it, and the great Tao was unbreakable. It truly became the counter to the divine steps, heaven-stomping technique of the paragon of alchemy. The will of the great Tao of space is completely restrained by Jun Mo's divine will. Qin Hao once again felt the feeling of the floating glass field. He knew that the divine steps would not be effective. However, he did not panic. After all, their cultivation was on par. Even if he took the staff attack head-on, there was no reason for him to lose. Let's see how you run. Die. Jun Mo swung the sky splitter above his head, creating a sky full of staff shadows. The sky full of staff shadows merged into one. It was as if the might of the heavens came crashing down. With a boom, it struck Qin Hao's eyes. Chapter 2206. 114 Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. No more wisdom. So fast, so vigorous. Qin Hao could no longer dodge under the restrictive spell of the painted ground prison. At this moment, the roar of the great path sword waterfall sounded in his body. The Taishu divine sword in his hand slashed out, and the evil light of the sky wheel suddenly surged. The infinite sword will in his body pushed out wave after wave, like layers of giant waves. All of it merged into this sword. Boom! Rip! His clothes were torn, and there was the sound of flesh being cut open. Qin Hao only felt that the bones in his hand that held the sword were shattered. His arm went soft, and he fell from the sky, unable to stop. The divine consciousness in his mind was in a mess, and the bones in his body were making crazy noises. However, Jun Mo, he was also frantically flying backwards. In front of him, the sword Qi was like a river of swords that was wreaking havoc. The sharp light actually penetrated his wheel of light and cut into his skin. His hand that was holding the staff was covered with small wounds, and there was a bloody mark on his chest. Good sword technique, Tamanaji praised. Fortunately, Divine Prince Jun Mo's wheel light is strong. Otherwise, this sword would be enough to cut him into pieces. The slightly older Yun Zhe Divine Guard said. These two people's divine power was ridiculously strong. Not to mention 5 immortal meridians. Even 6 immortal meridians would not be able to withstand their explosive power. As for the ordinary Great Sky Wheel and Small Sky Wheel, they were no different from ants in front of the perfect bloodline, unless they had cultivated for more than 100,000 years. 100,000 years of divine path was a watershed. This Yunja divine guard had heard from the Sage King that after 100,000 years of cultivation, the sky wheel would change qualitatively, and the divine meridians would disappear. For example, Shangji, Tiandu by Shun, and even Azura God, divine lord of the netherworld, Gui Di, and Umo. These great gods all possessed 100,000 years of cultivation in the divine Tao, and some of their cultivation had even surpassed that. Jun Mo could not help but cry out in pain. His sharp eyes looked at the small wound on his hand. His noble divine prince body and divine king bloodline had thick liquid flowing out of the wound. The feeling of the itch slowly penetrated, and for a moment he felt as if his body, as if it was paralyzed. All of this was related to the sword wound caused by Qin Hao. What exactly is his evil force? Letting out a muffled groan, Jun Mo urged the sky wheel to force the pus out of the wound. At this moment, he saw a pale white smoke floating out of the pus. The smoke seemed to condense into all kinds of strange faces, and they were howling at Junimo Buzz. Translation, 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 translation. Sheen Hao felt as if he was carrying countless mountains on his back as he was smashed into the ground by the staff. The scorched earth was shaken into a huge crater. He quickly crawled up, but before he could stand firm, he felt his limbs and bones shattering. The God King bloodline is truly terrifying. Taking a deep breath, the serene, tranquil water soul filtered the body and began to repair the damaged godly bones. Qin Hao raised his head and looked at Junimo. It was as if their minds were connected. Neither of them immediately attacked. They maintained their silence and observed each other seriously. Junmo's Tao was unable to penetrate it, but it seems that the evil force has not completely lost its influence. Qin Hao could sense the change in Junmo's aura. Within that aura, there was a faint remnant of his evil qi, which proved that Junmo had been corroded by evil qi and was immediately eliminated. Comparing the post-celestial Tao will to the primordial Tao will, the post-celestial Tao will is indeed not as powerful as the primordial Tao will. However, the evil qi that is condensed from all Tao will seems to be able to gradually mutate according to the opponent's strength. Qin Hao noticed that the evil qi was unable to penetrate Junmo's heavenly wheel bloodline at the beginning of the battle. It was unable to devour the opponent's Tao will and turn it into its own Tao like before. However, this inability to devour was only temporary. It seemed that the evil qi was able to evolve based on Junmo's Tao will and turn it into a Tao that was similar to or close to the opponent's Tao before assimilating it. This discovery caused Qin Hao to be unable to help but become excited. The post-celestial Tao was not necessarily destined to be weak, just like how experts grew step by step from being weak. Wasn't there someone who was as strong as a God King slowly cultivated? Once Qin Hao's evil qi was able to ignore Junmo's Tao will, the outcome of the battle would basically be a foregone conclusion. Bang! A figure flew down from the sky. The Azura evil spirit roared angrily and forcefully stabilized its body. Then, a heavenly Tao diagram that contained a primordial light came crashing down, once again striking the evil spirit's body. Blood seeped from the corner of the evil spirit's mouth as it was pushed down a little more. Azura, you're only a soul avatar. You're definitely not my match. Do you still want to continue? The upper extremity's imposing figure radiated with boundless light as it slowly descended. It stood above the evil spirit's head and coldly looked down on it. After the repeated clashes, the evil spirit's divine power was rapidly depleted. After all, it was not the main body, but a soul avatar that had been separated from the main body. Its divine origin was still in the Azura's true body. Creak! The evil spirit clenched its fists and angrily glared at the upper extremity divine lord. It felt extremely unjust. In truth, the rapid depletion of its divine power was only one of the reasons. Any aspect, Tao, that was separated from the aspect of killing would consume its divine power very quickly in battle. However, the most important reason was that the main body was not complete in the first place. Thus, the 90% combat power that the evil spirit inherited was not complete either. Otherwise, it would not have been suppressed by the upper extremity so quickly. The evil spirit sensed that the upper extremity's strength was about the same as the main body's 90%. If it was at its peak state back then, the evil spirit would have been able to completely suppress the upper extremity, and they would not be able to determine the victor. Sadly, the Azura still could not find the last of his soul avatar. The evil spirit's gaze silently swept in a direction. The evil spirit saw that the Ji Xiang and the Slayer were working together over there. They were using the mirror of reincarnation to fight the Tiandu, but they were still struggling. The Ji Xiang was in the same situation as the evil spirit. As its divine power depleted too quickly, it would not be able to stop the Tiandu sooner or later. Once that happened, the evil spirit and the Ji Xiang would both be defeated, and the entire battlefield would instantly fall into hell. Now that things have come to this, there's only one way. The evil spirit took a deep breath and sent a telepathic message to the Ji-Xiang. His words quietly reverberated in the Ji-Xiang's mind. The Ji-Xiang pressed his hand on the mirror of reincarnation and released an incomparably turbulent reincarnation field. It continuously reincarnated the Tian-Du's attacks. When it heard the evil spirit's voice, its body trembled slightly. Having inherited 90% of the Azura's divinity, the Ji-Xiang naturally understood the evil spirit's meaning. If it wanted to reverse the situation and break out of the current predicament, there was only one way that could work, and that was to soul fusion. You should know that I have 90% of the original body's combat power, and you have less than 40%. Only by letting your power return to me will there be a slight possibility of suppressing the upper extremity. The evil spirit continued to send a telepathic message. Every soul specialized in different abilities, but in the current situation, the evil spirit was undoubtedly more useful. This meant that once the two of them fused, the evil spirit would have to be the main one, and the Ji-Xiang would disappear. Every soul of the path of killing had an independent life. After the battle of the underworld, the Ji-Xiang had only been separated from the original body for a long time. He had not even taken a second look at this world. Now, was it going to vanish into thin air? Understand. The Ji-Xiang looked at the evil spirit from afar. It dispersed the divine power of massacre in its palm and threw the mirror of reincarnation to the slayer. Then, it took a step forward. It was like an ethereal shadow walking through the void. It walked to the evil spirit's position and overlapped with its figure. King! The slayer turned his head and saw this scene. His heart ached, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. Chapter 2207. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation comparing 90% power and 90% divinity. From the perspective of the Slayer, Evil Face was more appropriate for the current Azura Godmaster, while Ji-Face was more appropriate for the Azura Prince before the underworld was destroyed. Azura Prince was gentle and wise, and there was kindness hidden in the depths of his heart. The Slayer cherished the memory of the former Azura Prince. As the prince's attendant, he was naturally closer to Ji-Face. That was the Azura in the Slayer's heart, not the cruel Azura god filled with blood and killing intent after the underworld was destroyed. Watching Ji-Face leave bit by bit, the Slayer felt as though he saw the former Azura Prince gradually fade away, and there was a kind of sadness in his heart. Ji-Face wouldn't disappear forever after fusing with Evil Face's killing path. His temporary departure would only allow his godly power to concentrate on Evil Face and complete his godly path. However, the Slayer still felt very sad as he watched Azura change. If possible, he wished that Azura would always be that gentle and wise Azura Prince. The king's original body can't leave the Iron Throne of Pluto. Merging Ji-Face with Evil Face is the best way to deal with the situation. The killing light in his palm kept pouring into the reincarnation mirror. The Slayer glanced at Azura Feng's palace. Releasing Azura's original body would cause a terrible disaster to the killing world. Maybe his original body could beat back Upper Extreme and Tian-Du, but at the same time, he would kill everyone here. At that time, not to mention protecting Qin Hao and Muri, even his brothers Yellow Spring, Guadi, and Umo wouldn't be able to escape. A berserk Azura would destroy everything in his eyes, and it would be difficult to stop the killing. You should worry about your own situation first. A cold voice floated into his ears. In front of him, the great being from the primeval realm, Tian-Du, was shining with divine light. His majestic, godly path wheel shook the sky, and his eyes were fixed on the Slayer. He raised his fist and heavily punched with terrifying great path laws. Ji-Face's departure strengthened Evil Face, but was also beneficial to Tian-Du's battle. Only the Slayer was left because without Ji-Face, Tian-Du had a complete advantage in strength. The Slayer shouted, and the killing power in his palm exploded. A vast reincarnation field formed above the reincarnation mirror, and suddenly, The light reflected in Tiandu's fist. In that instant, the heavens shattered, cracks appearing everywhere. Then, Slayer spat out a mouthful of blood and used both hands to block the reincarnation mirror. He was sent flying by Tiandu's fist. The Slayer's cultivation was not shallow, but the difference in divine power caused the balance to tilt. He was still quite a distance away from the divine realm of the upper extremity and Tiandu at best. He was a mid-level god. He had no hope of winning this battle. However, as he was sent flying, a look of determination flashed across the Slayer's face. No matter what, he had to delay the Heaven Overseer and create an opportunity for the Yixiang to defeat the upper extremity. Perhaps, the moment the dust of this battle settled, the servants who watched over the god realm for the Azura Prince would no longer be able to serve him. Boom! The two figures overlapped in the void. The light of wisdom melted into the boundless darkness emanating from the evil figure, perfecting the killing path of the evil figure. At that moment, the evil face's body changed. Its aura became colder and deeper. The wheel of light that surrounded its body was like a world of darkness. That deep world was filled with destruction. However, the moment their eyes met, Upper Extreme saw that there was something else in the evil face's eyes. It was more lively, as if it was divinity. Now, let me reacquaint myself with you. The evil figure carried the power of destruction, but its eyes were extremely clear. It walked step by step toward Upper Extreme. Its calmness was like that of a madman who wanted to destroy the world, but still maintained its wisdom and calmness. The fusion of wisdom did not increase the upper limit of the evil figure's strength. In fact, its strength did not increase by much. However, the return of divinity made the will of Tao it released more complete. It also made it easier to control the Tao. All of this did not seem to change its strength, but caused a qualitative change in its combat power. Azura, Upper Extreme murmured. As the evil figure approached, the aura of death in the air became thicker. That pressure made even Upper Extreme, who had comprehended the desolation will, feel his heart tremble slightly. Having cultivated to this level, Upper Extreme clearly knew what had happened to the evil figure. Perhaps the evil figure now was worthy of being called the Azura God. No, it was far from enough. What was walking toward him was still the Azura's Tao, will soul form, not the Azura at his peak. Creak. Upper Extreme clenched his fists because of nervousness. Beads of cold sweat slid down his forehead. Feeling the pressure of the evil figure's aura, it was hard to imagine how powerful the complete Azura during the Underworld War would be. Boom! The desolation will flowed and merged into the divine diagram of the heavenly path. The majestic might of the great path pressed down with Upper Extreme's palm, covering the evil figure's head as it approached. The Yi Xiang looked up, and there was a hint of disdain in its eyes. It allowed the divine picture of the heavenly ways to come down on it. Just as the desolation was about to hit its body, a huge shadow of an ancient god appeared behind the Yi Xiang. It punched out, shattering the divine picture of the heavenly ways into light bubbles that filled the air. The desolation will that had gathered within was immediately disintegrated. Azura Hell. The evil figure raised its arm and pointed a finger forward. A terrifying black torrent burst from the tip of its finger. The will of the great path dyed the heavens into a world of darkness. Suddenly, a dense crowd of figures appeared in the space. They wore tattered robes and held the scimitars of the Grim Reaper. They charged forward like an army of millions. Their extreme killing intent ignited a frenzy, and they flooded the area where Upper Extreme was. This is the will of the Divine King. No, it's not. How could he use such power? Upper Extreme was facing an endless army of Grim Reapers. The Divine King created things with a single thought, bestowing the will of all things and opening up the heavens. This was the Divine King's innate, primordial great path. Azura was not yet the Divine King. How could he use such terrifying power? Although it was not the true will of the Divine King, It was enough to make upper extreme feel uncontrollable fear. Within the Divine King's law, the living beings in the worlds he created could be given strength according to his will. In other words, the evil figure was the creator. Wherever his will of Tao reached, he could create anything he wanted. At least, Upper Extreme's predicament was being surrounded by the endless army of divine masters. Lacking the divine power of Earth, I did not cultivate to the level of Nether King. But that did not stop me from creating the universe, because I once stood on the verge of becoming a divine king. The evil figure watched quietly as Upper Extreme struggled in the army of divine masters. He could fight with the divine son of light, a quasi-divine king. Naturally, he himself was also a quasi-divine king. The lack of Earth stopped Azura in his tracks. The eldest son of light reached the primordial great path first, and that was why he was able to break Azura's spirit apart. Otherwise, Azura would not have lost. Chapter 2208. 114 Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Reverse. The situation, the boundless darkness, seemed like it would never fade away. The slaughter, Tao intent, formed more and more shadows of the death god. The will of the Azura had bestowed upon them the power of a divine master. The upper limit was trapped in a boundless black ocean. This was a purgatory of endless slaughter. Dazzling divine power pierced through everything. The divine diagram of the heavenly Tao that flowed with desolate will wrapped around Shangji's body. Shangji roared and fought like an undefeatable war god. He stood in the center of the darkness, allowing the darkness to corrode his defenses. Shangji's tireless punches made him feel numb. He didn't even know how many dead souls he had destroyed. However, as time passed, no matter how valiant Shangji was, the radiance of the divine diagram of the heavenly Tao gradually dimmed. His aura was no longer the same as before, until one of the thousands of shadows of the grim Reaper slashed a wound on his body. The cold, pitch-black blade tore through Shangji's robes and drew out a bright red line of blood. Be destroyed. Shangji placed his palms on top of his head. An ancient and complex great Tao insignia appeared beneath his feet. The desolate divine will that surrounded Shangji's body condensed into a dazzling divine figure. He was like a divine king who looked down on the world. His blurry facial features gradually turned into the majestic face of the divine King Tianzhao. Be destroyed. A terrifying storm of Tao intent erupted from his palms. The storm swept out and flattened the heavens. Shangji, who was trapped in the Azura purgatory, finally felt that he couldn't hold on any longer. He had no choice but to use the power of faith and borrow the power of the divine King Tianzhao in the primeval realm to break through the Azura purgatory. Boom! A vast and boundless storm of light tore through everything, completely wiping out the darkness. The high-level divine master panted heavily, his eyes hazy with sweat and his chest heaving up and down. He silently watched the Azura evil face that the high-level divine master was performing. It was too terrifying. This was the power of a divine king. It was different from the past. The birth of any divine world was under the influence of a divine master's Tao intent. After a long time, it slowly formed the heavenly Tao. But the Azura could create things with a single thought. Even though what was created was merely a puppet body formed from Tao will and not a real life, it still made Shangji's heart palpitate. If he continued to be trapped in the Azura purgatory, he would be exhausted sooner or later. Even his celestial origin would be exhausted. To be able to reach this step and comprehend the desolation will, I thought you had broken free from the shackles of the Divine King. I did not expect you to still be a believer of the Divine King. Evil shook his head at upper extremity. Breaking the Azura purgatory with the power of faith from the King of Gods. How many blessings can you receive from the heavenly edict? With that, the evil face pointed at the upper pole. In an instant, the purgatory reappeared, and the darkness engulfed the upper pole like a tide. The figures holding the scimitars of the grim Reaper lined up densely, and they let out earth-shattering screams as they swung their scimitars. No, the upper pole was engulfed by the darkness once again, and his deafening screams could not hide the helplessness in them. Qin Hao heard the sound coming from above his head and subconsciously looked up. The wisdom face and the evil face had merged and perfected the evil face's Tao of killing. The evil face was now able to use some of the Abhijna and forbidden arts of the Asura. Looking at the situation, the upper pole was being suppressed, which was a good thing. However, when Qin Hao looked at the other battle, he could not help but break out in cold sweat. Without the wisdom face, the Slayer was fighting against the Inspector of Heaven alone. Even with the help of the Mirror of Reincarnation, the Supreme of the Slaughtering World spat out a mouthful of blood every time they clashed. The aura of the divine will that he exuded was getting weaker and weaker, almost to the point of being unstable. The evil face is suppressing the upper pole, but the Slayer is no match for the Inspector of Heaven. Qin Hao was not sure how long the upper pole could last in the endless Asura purgatory, but he could see that the Slayer's next move could kill the Inspector of Heaven. This was still a dangerous battle, and they had to end it as soon as possible. Looking back at Junimo, Qin Hao moved his mind, and surging sword chi surged around him. He took the lead and flew toward the Slayer. Countless sword chi flew with him. Suddenly, thousands of swords chimed together, and the sound of the swords was loud and clear, forming the sound of great Tao resonating. From afar, Qin Hao looked like he was wrapped in an ancient sword pagoda. Countless sword lights, with the great void sword in his hand as the core, burst out with dazzling divine light and pierced toward Jun. Jun looked on coldly. He stepped on the void, and the sky-splitting cudgel in his hand smashed down. The wheel light was injected into it, and the extended shadow of the cudgel was like a terrifying heavenly pillar. With a deep rumble, the cudgel brushed past Qin Hao's body and crashed into the ground. The scorched earth within a radius of tens of thousands of miles was reduced into a terrifying pit under the cudgel. Bang! 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 The extremely heavy rumbling sounds were incessant. The sky-splitting cudgel in Junmo's hand struck out hundreds of times at unbelievable speed. Every time, the cudgel brushed past Qin Hao. Under the restrictive spell of prison, Qin Hao still managed to dodge the cudgel repeatedly and was unable to hit him accurately. Damn it! Junimo couldn't help cursing angrily. Enjoying the smoothness of silk, was he born in the year of the loach? Facing the cudgel's continuous attacks, Qin Hao was getting closer and closer to Junimo. The momentum of the sword pagoda wrapped around his body was frightening. Although his fleet-foot steps couldn't unleash the magical effect it should have under Junmo's restrictive spell, he himself was extremely good at speed and movement techniques. They were painstakingly honed from countless fierce battles and were engraved in his bones and soul. I really missed the space Tao inside. As Qin Hao flew, he kept closing the distance between him and Junimo. His eyes were fixed on the godly source in Junmo's chest. The sword in his hand, that was imbued with a murderous aura, seemed exceptionally fierce. If he wasn't affected by the restrictive spell of prison, he could use the fleet-foot steps and instantly get close to Junimo. He wouldn't have to work so hard. Even if the fleet-foot steps were restricted, if his sky wheel was still filled with space divine power, it would still be greatly beneficial. What a pity! After this battle, he must restore space divine power and Red Lotus tyrannical fire. Chapter 2209. 114 Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation 14 kills Junmo's expression turned serious. The momentum formed by the 10,000 swords brought him a sense of nervousness that he had never felt before. Junimo knew that it was a sense of threat. They watched as Qin Hao's aura grew stronger and stronger. His flying figure shrouded the outline of a green sword pagoda, which became more and more substantial. After Junmo's 100-rod strike missed, he began to accumulate power. He gripped the sky splitter tightly with both hands. The muscles on his arms tightened and blood vessels appeared. The noble bloodline of the divine king roared. Junmo raised the chaotic divine weapon above his head. A layer of terrifying divine light wrapped around the staff like a vortex. Tao-crushing strike, he shouted. The noble divine prince had never been like this. The opponents he had met before were easily wiped out before they even had the chance to witness his true power. But now he felt an uncontrollable counterattack from Qin Hao. Just as the huge green sword pagoda broke through the void and descended, Lord Mo Gao Yang's sky-splitting rod heavily swung down. The colorful whirlpool fiercely attacked the sword pagoda. Following a terrifying explosion, the whirlpool exploded. Lord Mo Gao Yang seemed to be unable to resist the impact, and his body was sent flying. Then he swung the staff again. Bang! The great Tao was destroyed, and the bloodline of the divine king unleashed a destructive storm that could collapse the heavens and earth. When the second staff strike landed, the one who was knocked back was Qin Hao. The momentum of the green sword pagoda faltered, and dense cracks appeared on it. Kneel! Junmo raised the sky splitter and struck out again. The force of the staff was even more violent and turbulent. It was as if the heavens were being crushed by the shadow of his staff. Immediately, a terrifying divine light vibrated, and the sword pagodas were finally destroyed. They were densely packed and turned into light spots in the void. However, Qin Hao's figure in the tower did not stop. He suppressed the surging blood in his throat and shot out a sharp long rainbow from the great void sword in his hand, directly piercing towards Junmo's celestial source. Kneel! Junmo shouted at the top of his lungs. His facial features became extremely ferocious. The sharp sword light pierced through. He swung the staff for the fourth time. This time, the staff did not stop Qin Hao's attack. He hit Qin Hao's body directly. Bang! Crack! Ah! Junmo's pain scream spread throughout the void battleground. This was the third time in history that he had been injured by Qin Hao. His injury was more terrifying than any other time. His perfect wheel of translation was cut open. Sword Qi entered his body and tore his divine body apart. The power of the way of the sword directly invaded his divine source, threatening his life. Translator, Audiobook Studio Editor. Audiobook Studio, although the divine prince could still endure these injuries, the evil in the sword will had attached itself to his divine source. He felt as if many worms had entered his body. His consciousness could even see many deformed and terrifying faces appearing in his divine source. Junmo is injured. Tamanaji clenched his fists. His eyes shone with excitement. His injury was not light. Divine Prince Junmo underestimated his opponent. Although the bloodline of the Divine King can ignore any world power and way of the heaven suppression, this was the ancient nether domain. His opponent has an advantage, the older Yunzhe, divine garb beside him, said. Qin Hao had first entered the sword world to cultivate the way of the sword. Then, he entered the slaughter world to cultivate the way of the slaughter. Here, he had the advantage of way of the heavens. Neither of them was bound by way of the heavens. Junmo could ignore it, but his opponent had been strengthened by the power of the world. It was obvious which side had the advantage. Your Highness, in the army of the Tianzhao divine realm, many of the Tianzhao divine generals saw that Junmo was injured. Moreover, his divine source was injured. They could not help but feel their hearts in their throats. No one is allowed to come over. I will kill him with my own hands. Junmo clenched his teeth and sucked in a cold breath. Dazzling light gradually enveloped his body. The divine king armor protected his injured divine source. He looked at the falling Qin Hao. Then he grabbed the sky-splitting staff and swooped down. Then he swung out another attack. The staff light from the chaotic divine weapon pressed down on Qin Hao's head from afar. Junmo's divine source was injured, but so was Qin Hao. Half of his divine bones were almost shattered. The Azura evil face, Nether, Guad, and Yumo Master naturally felt it. However, they could not help him. After all, their opponent was not a simple person. Sword. The wind whistled past Qin Hao's ears. As he fell, the great void, sword in his hand, vibrated rhythmically. Dense shadows of divine swords appeared around him again. He grabbed with his left hand, and the blood-red spear appeared. He threw it at the charging Jun Mo held the chaotic divine weapon sky-splitting staff. Its power was extremely strong. Qin Hao had 2 divine weapons in his hands. He would not care about fairness. This battle was not fair to begin with. Whoosh! The blood-red spear pierced through. It emitted an extremely strong, bloody aura. It was like a gust of wind that poured into Junmo's throat. He could not help but vomit. He did not have time to attack Qin Hao. Instead, he attacked the spear. Clang! The sound of the great Dao reverberated. A layer of dark red blood mist seeped out of the spear. It was as if the spear was injured. It was hit by Junmo's sky-splitting staff. When the blood-red color spread out and covered his field of vision, Lord Mo actually lost sight of Qin Hao. He could only rely on his divine sense to lock onto Qin Hao's aura. He stared fiercely at a certain direction in the blood-red fog and stabbed his staff in that direction, stirring up divine particles that filled the sky and dispelling the blood-red color that covered the world. Junmo's strength is indeed strong. I did not believe it before, but now I do. Even if he has the same level of heavenly wheel and the same level of cultivation, the perfect demon of the untainted land is no match for the bloodline of the Divine King. Qin Hao's falling body had already stopped. He held the sword in one hand and the spear in the other. He closed his eyes and floated in midair. The bloodline of the Divine King was superior to ordinary perfect heavenly wheels. If Qin Hao could defeat the Divine Prince with his previous foolish thoughts, he would definitely die in this battle. However, something strange happened. No laws could corrode the bloodline of the Divine King, but it gradually weakened under the influence of the evil power. Perhaps Jun Mo did not even think of it. Even Qin Hao did not think of it. However, it really happened. Unknowingly, in the battle, Jun Mo frequently came into contact with the evil power. His divine intent had already weakened by 20%. Perhaps in Junmo's opinion, it was because his battle with Qin Hao was too intense and his divine power was depleted. However, Qin Hao deeply understood that this originated from the corrosion of the evil power. Jun Mo had been attacked by the evil power more than once and had it enter his body. Blood flowed from the spear and the sword. Qin Hao held the sword on the other side, but the sound of the sword was rhythmic. He had the power of 2 realms of the divine Tao. At this moment, he closed his eyes and felt very mysterious. It was as if he was ruling over 2 worlds. On his left was a blood-red ocean of slaughter, and on his right was all the sword intent in the world. Go to hell. Junmo's shout came through the blood fog. The terrifying rod light stirred up the turbulent law particles and chopped in front of him. Qin Hao's closed eyes opened at this moment. His deep pupils released an intense, divine radiance. One of his eyes was golden, and the other was completely blood-red. At this moment, the sword and spear left his hand at the same time. Whoosh! Whoosh! The sword and spear flew side by side, like 2 rainbows. Along the way, they split into many shadows. After counting carefully, the number of shadows of the spear and sword was exactly the same. There were 7 of them. Chapter 22:10. The legendary sword sovereign's famous technique. 1 sword, 7 kills. 1 sword strike, 7 killing intents, real and fake. All could be real, and all could be fake. Or perhaps it should be called 14 sword spear kills. The terrifying blood-colored torrent rushed forward like a surging river of blood. The 7 spear images were like 7 crazy lunatics. The whistling sound of the spear swept up the miserable howls of countless undead. The look in Junmo's eyes suddenly changed, and a trace of shock appeared on his fierce face. He looked at the 7 sword shadows that were also flying towards him, and shock was filled with a wisp of fear, and his face turned pale. Be it the spear or the sword, at this moment, he couldn't tell which one was real. Jun Mo smelled the scent of death. His spirit was firmly locked onto by Qin Hao's spear intent and sword intent. In the next second, he turned around and fled, madly running in the direction of the Tian Zhao God Realm's army. What a disgrace! He was the divine prince, and the innate deity king's bloodline flowed in his veins. In the chaos, the perfect Tianlun stood at the top of the pyramid. But even among all the perfect Tianlun, he, who was almost invincible, was running away, because he couldn't withstand Qin Hao's attack. At this moment, the entire army of the Tian Zhao God domain moved. Not a single Tianlun realm cultivator was left behind. They all rushed towards Jun Mo's direction to help. Die. The Tianlun of the Tian Zhao divine realm were not afraid of death. As long as they believed in the deity king, they would be reborn even if they died temporarily. But if Jun Mo died, all the Tianlun that went out today would die with him. There would be no reincarnation, and they would completely disappear from the chaos. Divine soldiers, divine generals, and countless shouts resounded throughout the battlefield. Upper extremity, Heaven Overseer, Feng Wei, and Xianxi also sensed the danger Jun Mo was in, and all of them wanted to help regardless of their own safety. Then, a very tacit scene took place. Shura, Slayer, you demon lord, and Divine General Mo too, who was restraining Xianxi, kept their opponents busy. They didn't expect to kill their opponents when they panicked, and they didn't even want to severely injure them. After all, their opponent's strength and skills weren't for nothing. They just wanted to hold them back, and that was enough. In fact, the restraining power of the slaughter world was far more than that. When the Tian Zhao divine army moved, all the Shura divine generals on Shura Mountain intercepted them. No one gave any orders, as if they were supposed to do so. The cause of all this was Qin Hao. What he did next was to slay the God Prince. Tamanaji, save, Jun Mo frantically turned back towards the army of the Tian Zhao God domain. He looked at the countless guardian divine generals and divine guards rescuing them. Usually, the Tianlun powerhouses could travel around the world with just a thought. But for some reason, Jun Mo felt that his father's subordinates were so far away from him, as if they were at the ends of the earth. Shura Mountain's outburst blocked the flood of the Tian Zhao divine army. High extremity, Tian Du, Feng Wei, and Xianxi couldn't free themselves. All the subordinates of the Tian Zhao divine king were restrained. The only one who still had strength left was the divine prince of the Yunzhe divine realm, Tamanaji. Jun Mo shouted Tamanaji's name, but he couldn't utter the words, "Save me." He and Tamanaji were both divine princes. In the past, neither was willing to submit to the other. Now, how could Jun Mo ask him to save him? Even if his life was in danger, he couldn't say it. But Jun Mo believed that Tamanaji would understand his meaning. When he shouted his name, the divine prince of the Yunzhe divine realm should have understood his thoughts because he really needed help. Heavenly Sound God Lord, let me help you. Tamanaji shouted at Heavenly Sound God Lord, who was fighting with you, Mo God Lord. However, he ignored Jun Mo and turned to charge toward Heavenly Sound God Lord's battle. The moment Tamanaji moved, all the Tianlun forces left behind in the Yunzhe divine realm naturally attacked the Devil Soul Guards. After all, they had to obey Tamanaji's will. You, Lu, Ji, you, Jun Mo watched as the other party led a large group of Yunzhe divine realm experts to surround Mo God Lord. As he fled, he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Was Tamanaji leaving him in the lurch? Although Heavenly Sound God Lord's cultivation was inferior to Mo God Lord's, he had cultivated in the Southern Heaven Buddhist world and cultivated Buddhist divine power. He could use many Buddhist divine abilities. Even if he couldn't defeat Mo God Lord, he could at least restrain him. Moreover, Tamanaji had led the rest of the Yunzhe divine realm army to deal with a mere Mo God Lord. Such a style was clear as day. Haha, it seems even the heavens can't save you. Qin Hao's cold voice came from behind him. Spear images and sword lights filled with death intent followed him like malicious spirits. Jun Mo had no choice but to turn around. In front of him, the Azura guards had transformed into a wall that blocked the heavenly edict divine soldier outside. Do you really think you can defeat me? Can you really do it? Can you do it? You're a piece of trash. In the eyes of Jun Mo, you, Qin Hao, are a piece of trash, a piece of trash, a piece of trash. His shouts reverberated through the world, his curses filled with unwillingness and helplessness, as well as a sliver of fear. Jun Mo had never known what fear was, and his father had never taught him. But now, without a teacher, his emotions were filled and devoured by a feeling called fear. Then, Jun Mo took out an item that didn't belong to him. It was a divine item he obtained from the Sword World's deity lord, sword god Wu Ji. The innate deity king's bone. Resplendent streams of light revolved around the hand bone. It radiated with an extremely vast and boundless aura of the way of the sword. It was as if it was not a hand bone, but a sword, the sword of an indestructible god king. Jun Mo finally smiled when he held the deity king's bone in his hand. The sword world had sacrificed so much to protect a certain person from escaping. But who would have thought that Qin Hao would die under the sword world's divine item? Aha! This is sword god king's Dao bone, left behind by a young deity lord called Wu Ji. Back then, he was so pitiful, nothing was left of him except for this Dao bone. It's as if he was presenting it to me. Jun Mo tossed the hand bone out and infused the Tian Zhao's divine intent into it. As if it was injected with life, the hand bone burst out with a blinding light and turned into a dazzling divine sword. Arrogant laughter pierced into Qin Hao's heart like thorns. Every time Jun Mo repeated Wu Ji's name, Qin Hao's soul felt like it was being sliced into countless pieces. Scenes of Wu Ji's death flashed before his eyes. Wu Ji died under the upper extreme palm. Dongsheng was forced to use the deity release to open a path for Qin Hao to escape. Daisakong came riding on the dragon just to keep Wu Ji's remains, but he was vaporized along with the dragon. The 6 elders of the academy were all killed by Shi, Ju, and Fen Wei. His teacher, the blind sword deity release, only left a scratch on their bodies. The unforgettable scenes were etched deep into his bones, and Qin Hao roared with hatred. His spear will and sword will were infused into the 14 killing moves, and they all rushed towards the deity king's sword in front of Jun Mo. It was supposed to be the sword world's divine item, the souls of countless sword cultivators. But now, it had become Jun Mo's shield. Jun Mo was not worthy. Now, he had suffered a backlash from the hand bone and was enveloped by the sword god king's remaining Dao intent. Figures evaporated one after another. Under the radiance of sword god king's will, be it the Tianzhao divine generals, the Shura guards, the 4 divine realms of the ancient underworld, or the Tianlun of the 2 divine king's forces, were all vaporized. Not even a divine king could save the vaporized Tianlun. The power of a single sword intent was already so terrifying. And at this moment, Qin Hao, who was enveloped by the sword god king's Dao bone, wasn't facing just one Dao bone. Swish, 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 swish. Sword light filled the sky. Qin Hao felt as if he was in a universe of swords. Endless sword chi entered his body, pierced his flesh, and fused with his blood, Tianlun, divine power, and even his divine soul and will. At this moment, a tragic cry came from Qin Hao's mouth and spread throughout the battlefield. He felt as if he had been instantly sliced into minced meat by the sword god king's sword intent. The pain was unbearable. Ha ha, is this ironic? The person that the sword realm risked everything to protect will one day mysteriously die under the supreme divine object of the sword realm. How laughable, how sad, and how wonderful. Jun Mo's face was filled with complacency as he laughed wildly. He was hiding behind the heaven-shocking divine sword, admiring everything. He saw Qin Hao's entire body being pierced by the sword light. Those terrifying sword intent particles seemed to be radiating from his body, instantly becoming riddled with holes. The scene was simply spectacular. How delightful, how delightful, truly satisfying. Junimo had never felt so comfortable before. It was as if he had accumulated a huge amount of resentment and was able to release it at this moment. It was simply boundless joy. He watched as Qin Hao's body gradually melted. Those unextinguishable evil spirits were also evaporated by the sword God King's sword intent. At this moment, Qin Hao was like a withered tree that had lost its dense branches and leaves. The evil spirits on his back had disappeared, causing him to become bare. His life was also heading towards decay. In his first life, his bones were crushed and his soul extracted. When he came back, he forged a perfect Tianlun. But what could he do? Even if he had the support of the Dao Sword Realm, cultivated the Massacre Dao intent in the Massacre Realm, and used the Reincarnation Mirror to temper his divine Dao for 30,000 years, he still lost to Prince Junimo. Trash. What a piece of trash. A lowly bastard with a rotten life. How can you compare to me? Watching as Qin Hao's figure slowly disappeared in the radiance of the sword intent, Junimo couldn't even sense his remaining aura. He couldn't help but let out a deep breath. Dead. Finally dead. He was completely dead. He couldn't kill Qin Hao no matter how hard he tried. Now, Qin Hao had finally died in the hands of Junimo. If he used this sword to kill Junimo, Prince Deity King wouldn't be able to revive. Furthermore, Qin Hao wouldn't let Junimo die so easily. He had a very special way to deal with it. He believed that Junimo would be very surprised after experiencing it. Qin Hao believed that the feeling of having divine power twisted would be more satisfying than having one's soul extracted. However, these Yinzhe Divine Realms Tianlun soldiers were not as lucky as the Heavenly Edict army. Because the enemy had left first, they were left behind to guard the rear. In the end, they were intercepted by the Tianlun soldiers of the four divine realms of the ancient underworld. In a few breaths, countless people had died. In short, only 50% of the divine guards had fled with Tamanaji. No, let me go. Great God Umo, let me go. The vast battlefield gradually fell silent. The two divine king armies had retreated, leaving behind only a one-armed man. Because his soul was under the control of Lord Umo, Fenway felt like a thread had been grasped in his opponent's hand. Fenway wanted to sever it, but he was powerless. With Junmo's departure, he was the only one left on the battlefield. One could easily imagine what Fenway was feeling. In front of him were Azura, Yellow Springs, Guadi, God Lord Umo, and the countless Tianlun soldiers and divine generals of the four divine realms. Aside from that, Fenway instinctively glanced in a certain direction. Just as he turned his head, a streak of light that contained the sword intent of a god king shot over, piercing through Fenway's forehead. As the powerful sword intent shattered his soul, the laws that spread out also devoured his divine source. A mighty god lord of a divine realm with 7 meridian divine glyphs. Someone who had once slaughtered without fear in the sword world. Someone who could summon the wind and summon the rain. Had now been slain in a single blow by a perfect Tianlun with 4 meridian divine glyphs. Fenway lost all signs of life, and his body fell from the sky. Although his death was due to the great pressure from the environment, it was undeniable that Qin Hao's current strength was undeniable. With 4 meridian divine glyphs, a god king sword in his hand, and the support of the ancient underworld's heavenly Dao, There was no doubt that Fun Wei would be able to kill someone with 7 Meridian Divine Glyphs. Normally, Fun Wei might have been able to put up a fight, but now, he had been killed by Qin Hao in a single blow. This was the strength of a perfect Tianlun. Even Jun Mo could not stop the current Qin Hao. What a pity. Although the quality was a little poor, it was still a tonic. Lord Yumo looked at Fun Wei's falling figure and stuck out his tongue in pity. Qin Hao dispersed the sword intent in his hand. The God King's sword's light dissipated and turned back into a bone. Holding the bone, Qin Hao felt a strange warmth in his palm. Old Fourth, my condolences. God Lord Yellow Spring's huge purple-gold skeleton was slowly covered by flesh and blood and returned to its previous appearance. He came to the front of the Azura evil face and looked at the corpse that the evil face was holding. He could not help but feel sad. The Slayer had died at the hands of the Heaven Supervisor. He had died fighting for the Slaughter World. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.